Welcome, everyone. The August 8th, 2023 regular council meeting is called to order at 4:01. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Do all the councillors have the late agenda? There are two late items. The first includes 3 letters related to Report Item 6.1, Temporary Use Permit, Lot 12, Blackrock Oceanfront Resort. 2 of these letters are requests to withdraw or retract letters in opposition to the proposed temporary use permit. The other is a letter in opposition to the permit. The second late item is an invitation to meet with BC Assessments at the UBCM conference. May I have a motion to amend the agenda by adding the first late item, additional public input regarding District of Ucluelet Temporary Use Permit 22-12 to Report Item 6.1, Temporary Use Permit Lot 12, Blackrock Oceanfront Resort, and adding the second late item, invitation to meet with BC Assessments as correspondence item 8.2.
So moved.
Councillor Anderson?
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare? All in favour? None opposed, that carries. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington?
Seconded.
Councillor Anderson? All in favour? None opposed, and that carries. The next item is 4.1, July 18th, 2023, regular minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? I do have one myself. There's an error on page 14. It's in my report for my meetings. The Barclay Community Forest has not issued a dividend in the amount of $1 million to each shareholder yet. They plan to do that in September. So just for clarification, the minutes say that they have issued it. May I have a motion to adopt the July 18th, 2023 regular minutes as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson?
Second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favour? None opposed, and that carries. We have one delegation this afternoon by Rogers Communications on local cell phone service. I understand the delegate will be presenting by Zoom. Please limit your presentation to 10 minutes. Is the delegate online, Mr. Rotenberg?
Yes, the delegate's online. I'm just promoting the delegate to a co-host so they can share their screen. You should be promoted now. Rogers, you'll just have to turn on your video and start sharing your screen.
Can everyone see me and hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. I will start sharing the screen here shortly. Just for context, it looks like my colleague hasn't joined, but my colleague Sam Sagita hopefully will join us shortly here. All right, if someone could confirm that the screen is being shared okay?
Yes, it is, thanks.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to meet with you today and discuss the plans in and around your area and within the province of BC. Just for context, my name is Courtney Cathcart and I do government relations formerly with Shaw and now with Rogers. Traditionally, I do support the prairies, but with my colleague leaving Rogers to pursue different ventures, I've been happy to support the province of BC until we find an interim replacement. So I apologize in advance if I get my geography wrong or get some of my context wrong, but hopefully we've got a good presentation for you today. Just moving forward, so we'll just quickly talk about the rationale behind Rogers coming together with Shaw, some of the commitments we've made to Western Canada, our plans around improving cellular connectivity, where we see local government playing a role, and of course happy to answer any questions from the district or anyone else. So just quickly, as you may have known, or as you may have seen over the last couple of years, Rogers and Shaw have formally come together, and there was no overlap in terms of our networks. Rogers has the largest wireless network in Canada, but they didn't have a wireline presence out west. And Shaw had an extensive wireline presence within BC and Alberta in particular, but also within Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And really what this opportunity does is bring not only the top and the fastest and the largest wireless network, but also Shaw's fastest wireline network together to be able to free up capital and capacity for us to expand to more communities, provide more competition and choice to residents, businesses, governments out west, but also it allows us to expand and accelerate the rollout of 5G to Western Canada to make sure that all Canadians can take advantage of the digital economy. As part of the transaction, Rogers and Shaw had made some commitments to improve connectivity out west. And I've got a few of them up here, but part of it is $5.5 billion to accelerate and expand 5G, as I alluded to, and invest in technology services. So really this is to ensure that 5G reaches more communities faster, and that gives industry, government, community, business, and residents the opportunity to tap into the latest technology and bring those advantages to the table, whether that's for school, for work, or otherwise. We also committed $1 billion to connect more underserved communities in Western Canada. About half of that is allocated to the province of BC, and so we're in constant communication with both ISED as well as the Ministry of Citizen Services on where there's opportunity for us to deploy those funds to best serve the residents within BC. Outside of that, and one thing that I'm particularly passionate about is the Connected for Success program. So this is providing a low-cost internet, high-speed internet option to fixed income residents in Western Canada. So that's seniors on, government assistance, that's refugee, folks on refugee settlement, maximum child care benefit families, etc. And so a whole host of residents are now available to get high-speed internet for as low as $10 a month in the province of BC. And there's a tiered option that really allows services to fit the needs of residents. So if you are a senior by yourself and you just need a 50 megabit per second download internet speed, there's an option for that. If you're a family of 4 or 5 and you've got folks doing school and you're working online and you're streaming in the household and doing multiple things at once, there's larger speed options available at about 70, 80, 85% off market rates. And so that's an exciting partnership that we've been working with the province, local municipalities, and not-for-profits to help roll out. As part of our investments in technology and to connect more communities, we do see net growth happening out west through a lot of that construction and investments in technology. So we're excited to see some job growth come out of that as well. This is the Connected for Success program. I won't touch too much on this, but as I mentioned, as low as $10 a month, there's tiered options, and we're excited to be able to launch a wireless option as well in fall here. And we'll have more details to provide once we have more clarity on that. But there will be a wireless option as well as a wireline option coming down the road very shortly. So these are the currently, and I don't know if my colleague Sam Sagita has joined. It doesn't look like it, so I'll just I'll continue on. So these are the proposed coverage areas between Highway 4 or along Highway 4 between Port Alberni and Tofino. So you can see there's sort of a collection of sites. We would obviously love to work with the district as well as various stakeholders as we start to narrow in on these connectivity options to ensure that we're providing the coverage where it's needed and in areas that make sense for local municipalities and local regional districts. We know highway coverage is important to local communities, but also to the province. And so we want to work quite closely with stakeholders to make sure that we're providing the connectivity that makes sense for them and in areas that make sense. We know a lot of these designs get done at a desktop level, and when we get down into the community, there's lots of discussion that needs to be had. And so we want to really work with the district and communities, et cetera, to find solutions that are going to make sense and find areas that are going to make sense for the community. Where we see local government play a role, so as a telecommunication provider, we're largely regulated by the CRTC, but obviously in terms of permitting and location and placement, municipalities have a huge role to play. And so working with us to help find those access to infrastructure that works for the districts and municipalities, providing easy access to public assets, infrastructure, or lands helps us to be able to move our builds more efficiently and quickly, and hopefully streamlines process on your side. The district has looked at sort of various connectivity strategies, so sharing as much of that in advance so we understand where your local priorities are, understanding your land use plan so that we can start to prepare for growth in the region. And if and when it makes sense, maybe exploring municipal access agreements that sort of provide a holistic framework for both the district, the municipality, as well as us in terms of building network within your area. And we've created sort of a upfront streamlined process that we're all aligned in, as opposed to sort of piecemeal activity that happens each time we want to apply for a permit or each time we want to do builds or upgrades in your area. So this is where we really see an opportunity to collaborate more effectively with local government, and look forward to discussing that in future with the district. I talked a lot about 5G, and I'll kind of glance over this. I do want to be cognizant of time, but obviously 5G requires a whole host of infrastructure, both wireline, wireless, small cell, towers. It's a collection, but it does enable a host of solutions that are yet to be fully realized, but are coming down the pipeline. So, traffic survey or traffic monitoring, smart lighting, air quality, public Wi-Fi, et cetera, grid monitoring. These are all things that we're starting to see come down the pipeline that are going to require that next generation technology. So yeah, just to sort of conclude, we want to work obviously closely with local municipalities and districts to really understand your needs and make sure that we can build network that's going to work for your residents and your ratepayers and your stakeholders, and that's going to be as efficient and successful for you as it is for us, and try and find those win-win-win scenarios. So that's kind of the closed notes of the conversation. I'm happy to keep the slides up in case anyone has specific questions, or I can drop that down and answer any other questions.
Thank you, Courtney. Any questions from council? I have one. What is your timeline for providing internet service along Highway 4 where there is none now?
I might pass it. I see my colleague Sam Sagita is online. I don't know if he can speak, but Sam, do you have an opportunity to respond to that?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh. The whole time I was trying to figure out how I can connect, and I'm in the meeting, but I didn't know that I could present. Anyway, sorry, I apologize for the last minute join, but okay, I can answer any questions. In terms of the timeline, we're hoping that we could try to get the acquisition portion completed this year, spilling over into next year, and then start construction in 2025 and have it on air in 2025.
And would you be utilizing TELUS poles for that? Or would you be...
Right now, what we have in terms of a proposal is going to be primarily on our own tower, but not with a co-location on a TELUS tower. But we do look for co-location opportunities whenever we we can if there are any opportunities. But right now, majority of these sites are actually on provincial crown land, and they'll be brand new.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. No worries.
Any other questions from council?
Yeah, me too.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
We have 7 report items. The first report item is 6.1, temporary use permit, Lot 12, Black Rock Oceanfront Resort. The first late item included public input on this matter. After staff present, there will be an opportunity for the applicant and then members of the public to provide input on the proposed permit. Welcome, Ms. Whitney Brown.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll just give our Manager of Corporate Services a moment. There we go. You can go straight to the next slide there. Actually, I guess I can. Never mind. So this application was first brought before council at their regular meeting on July 18th for a temporary use permit to allow a staff parking lot and construction staging area for a period of 2 years on Lot 12, as you can see on the map located just here. At that meeting, council directed staff to give notice for this TUP, which has now been given. So by way of a brief reminder, Lot 12 is a forested lot beside the current Black Rock Resort, which also contains a trail segment of the Wild Pacific Trail. The applicant's proposal, as mentioned, is to create a temporary parking lot and staging area to facilitate a major renovation of the Black Rock Resort. The use would be located, as you can see on screen, resulting in the clearing of approximately 850 square meters of mature forest. Since the initial application before council on the 18th, the applicant has retained a certified arborist and provided a tree management plan, which is published on page 71 of the agenda before you and does form part of that temporary use permit. The arborist has provided a fairly rigorous stringent recommendations on mitigation strategies for retained trees, which would be those not identified in hatching on that site plan in front of you. The permit before council in the agenda here is based on the applicant's submitted site plan and includes a condition that they follow all recommendations of the arborist report for any work associated with the temporary use permit. At the meeting on the 18th, council also passed a resolution that staff would reach out to the Wild Pacific Trail Society for comment on the matter, which was completed, and their letter is also included in that agenda before you on page 79. Additional public correspondence on this matter, as has been mentioned, is also published in the agenda and the late agenda. So at this time, as always, I'm happy to answer any questions for staff, and I believe the applicant is also present, as well as perhaps members of the public, and they should, of course, all be given a chance to speak.
Great, thank you, Ms. Whitney Brown. Start with councillors. Any questions for staff? In the letter from the Wild Pacific Trail, it does suggest an alternate route for the trail. Is it possible that staff could show us that on the screen?
I believe that there is a slide. I'll just ask the Director of Corporate Services to bring those back up. I'll just swipe through here for a moment. Sorry for the spoilers as I... So that's the trail map in front of the Black Rock Resort there. That's the, as I understand, the desired trail map. And for specific questions about the trail, I'd actually direct those to my coworker, John Toogood, who has much more expertise on the trail subject than myself.
Great, thank you. Mr. Toogood, so can you maybe point out where the trail is now, as this is what they're proposing, correct?
Yeah, through the mayor, that's correct. Well, this is kind of, we've talked this over with David a few times, and Bruce brought this this proposed route through to the strata, and this was at COVID, and just at the start of COVID, so that conversation really dropped while other priorities kind of presented themselves. Currently, the trail kind of comes off that site. The kind of my right-hand side, that would be coming off of Big Beach, and kind of walking through the shoreline area, and then it would walk in front of one of the units, go kind of underneath the hot tubs, and then there's a little expensive bit that would cross a chasm. But you know, we've kind of looked at it. It does look doable. You know, it's just a feat of engineering, and then walk kind of slightly below the restaurant. So there's definitely a win-win opportunity there, and I think it's a great conversation to have in the future.
And do you have a pointer? Could you show us where the trail is now?
Let's see here. There we go. So right now this is Big Beach right here, and you can walk here on a lower tide and connect to this part of the trail. And you can also walk into the forest and you can connect through here. And there is a right-of-way that gets you to here where the right-of-way stops, and there's a bit of no man's land. There used to be a stair here. I think a lot of people remember that stair location. So it was possible to walk through the Black Rock site. The original development had markings on the pavement that kind of delineated it. Those markings have faded away, and I've heard from people that are a little uncomfortable walking through here. The stair's been removed, so getting through the Black Rock site now is difficult. There's another right-of-way that comes up through here and connects to the Marine Drive, and there's no sidewalk on this side, and there's no crossing of the road. So again, that's not a great connecting point either. And down this property line is the current connection to the viewpoint on the subject lot. And it goes along this property line that's protected by a right-of-way, and then it sweeps around here and connects to the Wild Pacific Trail proper, heading toward Ocean West.
Great, thank you. And are the owners amenable to relocating the trail, as far as you know?
Because it's a strata, it's a little more complex. It's involving the strata getting together and having a vote. David has entered some conversations with us, and again, I think we were kind of moving ahead with some momentum, and then COVID hit, and the conversations kind of got sidelined at that point.
Any other comments from council? The other thing I did the other day was I walked to Browns Beach, and that's kind of right where Odyssey Lane starts. There's a very expensive property right at that corner lot, and from what I can tell, that house would be looking straight across at this new RV lot. Is that correct?
Yeah, that corner lot does kind of look into that bay and does look at this lot.
It's like a surge channel, and most of the house is fronting the surge channel as opposed to the open ocean.
Yep, that's correct.
Is there a way of buffering that so they aren't, that $1 million property is not looking into a trailer park?
Well, right now the proposal for the temporary use permit is for parking and staging. The RVs aren't forming part of this temporary use. This is not for accommodation.
So at this stage, it's strictly parking and CCAN
Yeah,
placement?
staging for, there's an upcoming renovation, and so they want to stage materials.
So is there a way to buffer that property's view so they aren't looking at a parking lot?
It'd be difficult. There are trees that would be in that space, and there could be fencing and stuff like that implemented as well. But I wouldn't think the impact is going to be really large on that house. I wouldn't imagine, but we are clearing a portion of forest, and there will be impact.
Right.
If I may, looking at the site plan, I can't see that they would be able to see it at all walking that trail, and their orientation is not, it's not facing back towards that parking lot. If anything, it's pointed in the opposite direction out towards the ocean. So, if you walk that trail along the surge channel and you look at that house, there's not really windows there that would be faced towards this. So there's zero impact, I would say.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
I have a question. I don't know if it's. I have a question, but I don't know if it's better suited for district staff or for Blair on behalf of the resort. But maybe I'll ask it, and if this is a question for BlackRock, they can jump in. I'm just curious, who owns the lot? I understand BlackRock is a strata. Can you give me a little bit of history on how and when that lot was purchased and how the ownership works out? Whomever.
Would you like me to do that now, or should we wait until after this section?
We're giving the applicant the opportunity to speak, so sure, if you don't mind going up to the mic.
Thank you. David Earhart, Mayor and Council. In answer to the question that you've raised, the 3.7 roughly acres that is referenced in this application that you're questioning on is owned by a company called BlackRock Residences, Inc. The original developers of BlackRock Oceanfront Resort is made up of my partner Amar Baines and myself. We were the principal shareholders, and we were the developers of the project. At BlackRock, the BlackRock Strata, which is the roughly 8 acres that's adjacent, that everyone refers to as BlackRock, it is a strata property. We own all of the commercial lots. In addition to that, we also own 28 of the residential strata lots that make that up. I'm giving you a bit more information for perspective. The 3.7 acres that is adjoining us is owned by BlackRock Residence, which again is corporately held, again represented by Amar Baines and myself. So we control that land, whereas on the actual strata lands, we are one of 137 owners of that property. So we obviously, with controlling 28 of the lots plus the 4 commercial lots, we're in a minority position. But we are the managers of the rental pool as well, in addition.
Okay, so if I understand, the lot in question is owned by you and your partner.
That's correct.
Okay, if I may, I have a couple follow-up questions, if that's all right, through the mayor. Was that lot purchased? Can you tell me when that lot was purchased relative to the lot upon which the resort is built? Like, were they purchased at the same time?
No, we purchased the 8-acre parcel in around 2005, and we purchased the adjacent lands from Weyerhaeuser. Would have been around 2008 to 2009, somewhere between 2008 and 2010. But we had purchased that early on, before the actual hotel was operational.
Right. And what at the time, and maybe there's no answer to this, but what was the intent of purchasing that land? It just came up, or was it part of like a strategic vision for the resort?
Well, it was clearly part of a strategic vision. Those lands were controlled as part of the Weyerhaeuser package. We purchased the 8-acre parcel from Marine Properties, who I'm sure you, those if you're longtime residents will know who that is. And we subsequently bought the piece next door because we realized that in order to protect our situation in the long term, that we needed to make certain that we had the land adjacent. It was going onto the market by Weyerhaeuser, and it made sense that we should control it rather than some unknown party. In particular, we were concerned that we wanted to have our options available to us, whether it was from an expansion of the hotel, but equally important is that part of that zoning at that time under the Weyerhaeuser program was for the permission to create staff housing. So we knew that we needed to have some ability to protect our long-term interest at that time, and it was somewhat early on in the process, and you never know what's going to happen in the future, so we made that investment at that time.
And then I have one final question, and this one might be better directed to district staff. But at the time that it was purchased, there's nothing in the current proposal that goes against the zoning. And was there any covenant or anything like that on the land? Like, is there any conflict between what's being proposed right now and what would have been on the books at the time that the lot was purchased?
Through the mayor, that is a good and complicated question. There's lots of history with many of these lots as Weyerhaeuser developed. So the lot 12, if you look into the zoning, is actually zoned for affordable housing with a secondary use of resort condominium, and it was the intent was that affordable housing was going to be created, and then there was a covenant on the smaller lot where the staff housing is now, and there was a covenant on lot 12 that specified that this housing had to be created, but it also could be created on this lot. So that was fulfilled, and I believe that covenant is no longer on title. So there probably is going to have to be a rezoning at some time to qualify, what are the uses, and it's going to be up to the landowner to come up with, what are the new uses for it. But the current use right now is for affordable housing.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
A quick question. Would employee housing in this case fit under that category of affordable housing?
That is a good question. Affordable housing in our zoning bylaw.
Our zoning bylaw does contain a definition for staff housing, which is separate from affordable housing. So I think in this case, in order to add staff housing would require a rezoning process.
Right.
Through the mayor.
So through the mayor, at this time, the current zoning for that lot 12, is it affordable housing? It is right now. So there would have to be a zoning change for staff housing to go in.
Through the mayor, that would be correct. The current proposal essentially doesn't require a rezoning because it is seeking a temporary use permit. So the staging and parking is not a permitted use under the zoning. If they were pursuing staff housing, it would need a rezoning as well.
Right. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Mafty?
I just have a quick follow-up question there, and I don't want to digress into semantics, but as far as the district or as far as we define affordable housing, would RVs count as housing?
If you give me, through the mayor, if you give me one moment, I can redo the definition for affordable housing.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, I mean, I'm not trying to be clever here. I'm just wondering if a collection of RVs that staff would live in counts as staff housing as far as the district would look at it.
If I may, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I think when we're talking about we're talking about two different aspects here. As one is with respect to temporary housing. Temporary housing is determined by permanent housing, so RV accommodation wouldn't really fit into that realm. With respect to what's before council right now is really regarding the temporary use application for parking, right? So a fulsome discussion with the applicant and the property owner in the future, once they determine what they would like to do, would need to occur to determine like employee housing, affordable housing, what that looks like, what shape it looks like, all depending on what the applicant actually wants to do with the land. So that would come with a rezoning question, and if it was required. So we're talking about really two different aspects here when we're reviewing this application. Is the housing isn't really been requested at this point in time. It's a future consideration that the applicant has talked to staff about. But right now this is a temporary use permit. Just they're asking to create that staging area and a parking lot for it. So a very good discussion with respect to housing options, staffing housing that the applicant would bring forward at a future date. And that would probably be the appropriate time to get into the merits of all the different aspects. But generally speaking, and I'll yield to the definition, but an RV would not qualify as affordable housing because it's not permanent.
Thank you.
Ms. Whitney Brown, would you like to read the definition? Just because it was asked.
Through the mayor, our bylaw defines affordable housing as residential housing under the terms of a housing agreement with the district pursuant to Section 905 of the Local Government Act. So residential housing would be more permanent housing.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I have a question for staff, which is, what is the current zoning of this lot? Because as far as I understand, there's not a specific affordable housing zoning designation, just a description. And I understand it's a CD zone, but specifically to this lot, this is the first time I've heard about it and being affordable housing on the waterfront.
That'd be nice.
Through the mayor, this is CD5C subzone, Development Area 3, Ocean West. So it's CD5C. Sorry, yeah, 5E subzone. And it's CD5E 1.3, which says the following uses are permitted on Lot 12 in the area of CD5E subzone labeled resort condo, but secondary permitted uses are only permitted in conjunction with principal. The principal is affordable housing. The second is resort condo. That's on page B117 of our zoning bylaw.
Follow up to that, Councillor Kennington?
That's a weird one. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to see that those are combined on this lot in particular. But now that I hear that resort condo is also as a use, and it's kind of those two things can go hand in hand as opposed to all affordable housing, because that to me did not make any sense. So. It sounds to me like we could, do quite a bit of development on that property, not just affordable housing.
Councillor Mafty?
I just want to jump in to make sure I understood correctly. The primary use is affordable housing, and the secondary use is staff house. No, sorry. Affordable housing is the primary use. Resort condo is the secondary use, but the secondary use is only permitted in conjunction with the first.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Okay, so if anything is going to be built there, it has to be affordable housing plus something else.
Through the mayor, yes.
Thank you.
Except for in the event of a temporary use permit.
Yes, yes.
The matter
That's
before
why
us.
we're here, I guess.
Councillor Anderson?
And through the mayor, so just to address, I think, Dwayne, when you were mentioning that we're talking about the temporary use permit today, but I do think that there is a tie-in here, so it kind of warrants a bit of conversation about the possible request for a permit later. Just in the report to council, just above the analysis of options, it says, what is it, providing a full vegetation and restoration plan unless they have been issued a development permit for the comprehensive development of the Lot 12 site. So I think in that regard, it's kind of bears that conversation as to what may happen after and where we go after that. So yeah.
Is there a question in there? What is the long-term plan? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think it warrants what the goal of the proponent is in the long term. Because in a temporary use permit, there would be you'd have to go back to the restoration or the revegetation there. Unless this is the long-term goal, which I think is important to discuss what is going to happen later, because in which case you wouldn't have to go through that process. And this would be something that would be employee housing down the road, which I believe is the long-term goal. I think it's a better question for Mr. Earhart.
In 2020, we began discussions with staff on specifically that part of the exercise, which was looking at what potentials there were for the creation of a first block of what we call employee housing, which may have somewhat, depending on one's viewpoint of what the terminology is. And we were looking at that. And in fact, the drawing even that you have presently before you on this temporary use permit will show shaded in the location of where we were proposing in 2020 that would take place. And the reason that the temporary use permit that we presently have in front of you envisioned this temporary parking in the location it's at is because that corresponded with the location of where the parking would be in the event that we are able to move forward with the staff or the employee housing. So there were actually plans that were created showing to the west of that parking area the development of a housing facility. So the whole idea was that we were trying to synchronize, the short-term needs with part of a long-term planning process whereby this parking area could become part of an expanded employee housing facility. And with the idea behind, as staff recommended, which we have no problem with, by the way, that if there isn't progress made on the employee housing component, that the area that we do clear would be revegetated, because we have no need for a parking lot in the middle of the forest other than to solve our immediate problems to do with the renovations.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one question through the mayor. I understand we're here discussing a temporary use permit, which is fairly short term. Do the short, medium, or long term plans of the owners of the lot involve the creation of affordable housing as per the zoning?
I think, with due respect, that is what I was trying to convey to you a few moments ago, is that we had, and in fact the drawings that you see that is attached to this do actually show the location of where that building was going to be.
So I maybe misunderstood though, because I thought you were talking about staff housing, which would be for your employees, right?
Okay. Depending on the jurisdiction you work in, I suppose there's different nuances to what is staff housing versus employee housing. From my perspective, let's word it slightly different, is that if we were carrying out development there, we envision the development of housing that would be for locals, that would be restricted, covenanted, and possibly even under rent controls. Now, what definition you use here in Ucluelet to apply to those definitions, I'm not certain, so I can't really comment whether you call it staff or employee housing.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into the nitty gritty, I guess what I'm wondering is if housing were created, would it be open to anybody, regardless of whether or not they were employed at the Black Rock Resort?
We would put our own employees in first position.
Okay, so it'd be more, again, without getting into the semantics, it's more employee housing for your staff rather than affordable housing for the community at large.
It'd be directed to the staff first.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hoare, anything from you?
They've been covering my queries, so why reiterate?
Okay, if there's no more questions for the applicant, then this is the opportunity for members of the public to provide input.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. I would like to, we seem to have taken a fairly substantial detour from the actual subject of this time in front of us, which was dealing with a temporary use permit. So with your permission, I would like to address that matter so that that is clear, so that it can be dealt with, because I think what we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes really had nothing to do with a temporary use permit for a parking lot. So if I may provide a few comments in that.
Certainly.
Thank you. Just generally, what I'd like to say is this, is I will not bore you with a repeat of the somewhat impassioned commentary I gave last time I appeared before you in respect to why Black Rock needs this parking area. So I will move on from that. I do want to say that the temporary use permit concept and most of what is in the temporary use permit that has been submitted and put before you, we have no problems with. There are not issues. There are a couple of technical concerns that we have within the document itself, 3 of them in particular that I do want to mention. And so I will maybe do that. And to assist me in that, I have asked our arborist, David Janelle, and also Joe here to be available to provide some answers to it. The one thing that we did want to mention is that in Schedule 3 of the temporary use permit, there are some requests and some things that we are being asked to specifically accomplish. And I had the privilege of speaking with the CAO earlier today and also with Monica, and they have been helpful, and we have sort of worked through most of the pieces of this. However, I did want to just raise it again so that you as council had a bit of a sense of the concerns that we have. In Schedule 3 of the temporary use permit, and if you'll just give me a moment here, I'll just find it. There is a couple of sections that we are concerned about. Firstly, in Section A of the Schedule 3, it talks about the clearing of approximately 850 square meters, 7 mature trees, in addition of fill, creation of driveways, access to Marine Drive, and associated civil works. We have a problem with the choice of words of 7 mature trees. In the July 18th report that was given to council, what it does say in it on the second page at the very bottom, it does talk about a minimum of 7 trees. The reason that I'm raising this point is that we want to make certain, as good corporate citizens, that if a temporary use permit is issued to us, we are fulfilling it to the letter of the law. We don't want to cut any corners. We don't want to take any shortcuts. The reason that I'm concerned about the wording of 7 trees is that, yes, there are 7 trees that are within the immediate area of where the parking lot is located. However, there are 2 trees to the east and 4 trees to the west of the parking lot area that are in close proximity to the clearing lines for the parking lot. At this point in time, our arborist has not been able to ascertain whether or not those trees are going to be successfully saved through the process. There's a lot of factors that come into it, safety, where the roots are, all of those sorts of things. So I don't want us to be in a situation where the TUP says 7 trees, and then what happens is we get a report back after the monitoring of the exercise by our arborist that says, hey, this tree over here is a danger tree, we're going to have to do something about it. So I'm hoping that within the temporary use permit there will be the flexibility for the final determination of the number of trees to be governed by the arborist in his professional opinion. So that's the first issue that I am concerned about, and I did want to raise at this point. The second matter that I wanted to raise is that we want to be absolutely certain that there's clarity in this temporary use permit as to the process that we take in order to go in. The destination, which is preserving as many trees as possible and doing a proper job on the site, we share with the planning staff. Where there's a maybe, and I say maybe, a bit of a difference, is that our concern is that in order to do this work and get us to that end result, the methodology that we believe we will have to follow through with doing the work is slightly different than what possibly the TUP could be read as, specifically in Schedule 3, item E. It talks about prior to any site mobilization, a series of things are going to take place. Our concern with that is that if you define site mobilization as anything that happens on the site, then we have a problem. Because in order to do the work with the evaluating the trees, putting up the flagging, putting up any fence protection, establishing the viability of the trees, we have to be able to get into the site, and we have to be able to clear out the understudy or the understory with the soleil and all of that sort of thing in order to get in there to work. So we want to make absolutely certain that there is clarity that we do need to do that type of work. And I'm going to, at this point, ask with your permission to ask our arborist to maybe speak to the process that he envisions that needs to take place in order for us to successfully meet the long-term goals that are set out in this TUP.
That would be fine.
Hi, my name is David Gemmel. I'm an ISA certified arborist. And
Joe Corzoli, certified danger tree assessor.
yeah, a few things that were brought up about that we've run into problems before in municipalities with tree protection fencing being put in prior to, like an initial clearing, I guess, is it does pose like a safety risk for, if we're doing tree removal in this environment. The idea is to protect the critical root zone of the trees, but to allow for work to, I guess, initially start, you kind of need to go into the area and kind of clear out like a safe work zone. Because our main goal for is the health of the trees, and safety is paramount. So the way we envisioned and what we've done in the past with municipalities is they erect the tree fencing and then you have to go in and try and work around this. And basically tree fencing is good for, kind of giving the excavator operator like the second phase a really good idea of where these root zones exist. So I guess one of the concerns that we would have with like, for example, the tree fencing going in before like the initial attack, I guess, would be it just kind of gets in the way, and it kind of stops like one from working safely on the ground or in the trees. Would be one of the issues there. And we're like talking about some of these other trees that are on site. When we did our site assessment, we kind of took note of the trees that are in the footprint of the, those were the ones that went into the report. We made recommendations for the health of the trees, right? It's like essentially, if you look at the tree, you look at the drip line, that's kind of the visual you get of how this critical root zone is. But it's a formula that you apply to the DBH, which is the diameter of breast height, and we don't really know exactly where the roots go. So we've made the recommendation as well for myself or Joe to be on site. Well, any excavation work that's being done, obviously we would be on site if there was, trees that are going to be removed or fencing being erected, because then we made the recommendation to David here and his in the report saying, the critical root zone, it's kind of recommended that you give trees need room to grow, so you want to basically give them as much space as you can, but you can go inside there. You just need to use the proper procedures in that with protecting the root zone in that. But with the fencing and whatnot, is that what we're concerned about at first, or?
Because you have to see what.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
You have to see what's on the ground, and in order to, I don't know if you guys have been in there, it's brushy. So, and there isn't much. There's a few windfalls in there, and when you take down the other trees, that they're soft because they got the branches on them, so they're not going to affect the root zones. It's the machines that are affecting the root zones. So we have to make an area for the machine to work around these trees to save the roots. That's our main. And then that's when you put the fencing in, not before that. Before that doesn't mean anything really, because we're not affecting the root zones on our phase of the process.
Yeah, is that kind of what clarify anything for you guys, or is that a concern for anybody?
So what you're suggesting is taking out that item E out of Schedule 3?
Where it says all the fencing has to be up prior to we do anything.
Mm-hmm.
All we need is the outside boundary, and that's in. And then once we've got our area down, we can tag even before the machine gets in. Outside the thing, even before the machine gets in, we can tag in a rough idea where the zones are, and the machine. What I see it, we have to do some serious stuff at the very beginning. With 2 trees at the beginning, the root zones cover both ways. So that's right where the 2 bigger trees are. And then that we'll have to do the prescription that we put in on that.
So we've made recommendations on how you can work in and around the critical root zone. It's all in the tree report. There's a pile of information in there. So getting back to the 7 trees, we have not assessed every tree in there for safety, just to put that out there. And again, that's why the tree fencing is most important for excavation work, because they do the most damage. Like taking down trees, we can work inside a very small footprint. And use rigging techniques and whatnot to bring it down without causing any damage in the root zones and damaging any other trees in the area. It's the excavators that you want, because they're a big chunk of iron moving around in the forest there, and they damage trees and dig up the roots and things like that. So that's when I would recommend is putting it in kind of once you do like an initial grubbing, like clearing out around the zone, not doing any big tree removal at that point, but just making it like identifying the drip lines. and like I said,
if one of us is on site.
Yeah, the recommendation is for either myself or Joe to be on site monitoring the excavation work. There's definitely a process that goes on with the operator and the arborist. So, and again, we have not assessed any trees outside the footprint. It was only the ones inside that were, right on the boundary that were, could be affected. Everything inside the footprint is being removed. 7 of them or something like this. So.
I think Councillor Hoare has a question for you.
Not so much a question. I'm wondering whether a simple way to solve the part E of the section 3 is if it's that prior to any site mobilization that's a problem. If it said prior to any site excavation, because it's the, you're still going to be delineating these drip lines, you're still going to be protecting these tree zones potentially. So that part of that section is still fine. It's just the start of when those things go up. And obviously, yeah, it would be the excavators and the large machinery that you're really trying to. I'm just wondering if a single word change would make that work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's when changing that to excavation, because we're walking around in our feet and doing very small impact.
And then the next phase, you remember though that the roots are still inside the zone. So the fence is there, but now the fence is going to come down, and we're going to be working inside that fence to create a parking lot too on the other end, and we're going to make sure.
And the recommendations are in the tree report as well for how you work inside the critical root zone. And again, this is, we do our best to save the root zones of the trees, because that's the life force of the tree. So we can do everything that we can in our power, and still there may be some, effects that,
We understand that.
the demise of the trees.
So those were 2 items on Schedule 3. Mr. Earhart, is there another issue? There is a third. I thought there was.
Because we have long-term plans and ambitions for those lands, one of the things that after we complete the clearing of the vegetation and whatnot, the logging and that sort of thing, there is a layer of organics that is going to be present there. We would like, and I don't know if this needs to be in the temporary use permit or not, or if this is just something that we can agree with staff, we believe that it's imperative that we retain on site a berm of those organics, rather than hauling them off and dumping them somewhere. The rationale behind that is that by retaining those organics, in talking to our landscape architect, they feel that if we were in a situation where we had to revegetate, we need to have those organics to allow a bedding for any revegetation to take place. And if our actual goal for the creation of housing takes place, we are going to need those organics for landscaping purposes and for all of the work that'll take place around the future building. So that's something that is quite important and has not been dealt with and was a practical thing. But I guess as we start getting into the nitty-gritty of this, we start realizing there's some things that we need to plan ahead for and take as part of this. So I would raise that as the third point that we would ask to be taken into consideration. Let us be able to keep those organics and that topsoil in position in the short term during the period of the temporary use permit, because if we do build, we need it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, just one quick question, and it doesn't matter who answers, but perhaps the arborist would have the greatest perspective. Actually, 2 questions. These 7 trees, just like, what can you just like describe these trees? Like, what are we talking about? How big are these trees? How old are they? Like, what's the diameter at breast height of these trees we're discussing?
The diameter of breast height is in the report. I don't have it in front of me. I can't say, but there are outside the footprint of this parking lot. Depending on what you consider significant, there are some significant trees outside that would be not a concern. The ones inside, to me, just going off of memory. Sorry, I work with trees all the time, but the
Yeah. Okay. If it's in the report, what I have here, like, 1.16 meters. They're all here. Western red cedar,
Yeah.
111.2. So these are like fairly large trees, and I mean, I appreciate the earlier points that we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves. And at the end of the day, we're here to talk about a temporary use permit. It's for 2 years, and so if we consider this temporary use permit, we have to consider what happens after 2 years if there are no other plans. What's involved in revegetating an area with trees that are, more than a meter across? Like, how do you revegetate old growth forests like that?
So just to clarify, these are the trees that are being retained, and these are the ones that were going to be for retention. These aren't trees being removed. Because 375, the Western red at like 111.2. These are on the edge, and these are the ones that we have made the recommendations for staying like outside the crate. But if you have to go inside, then you stick to the recommendations of the report, and it's overseen by myself or Joe. I don't believe that these are the ones that are being removed. The ones inside, actually, if you have time, maybe just like they're
understory red cedars probably.
Because these are the ones that I'm talking about. These significant ones are the ones that we want to retain. These aren't the ones being cut down, like 375. The ones.
So, like, what's being cut down? How does what you want to remove compare to this? Like, give me or anyone who's paying attention who wants to know, like, what are you talking about?
There's some cedars.
Can you use the mic, please, Joe? Thanks.
There's some cedars that are they're kind of understory, that they're catching up to the older ones are dying. The older ones are on their way. They're older trees, right? And you can tell that they got the white tops, like me. and underneath, there's the other ones that are coming up underneath, and they're probably a third in diameter. There's one older one inside there, but it's in the middle, and there's one older one there. It's about 1.5 meters, and it's like a snag. It's totally dead. That's in there, and then there's 3 or 4 smaller cedars, like this. Let's see.
Oh, that's pretty big, I'd say.
20.
Yeah, sure. No, I guess I'm just thinking about myself, like around the property, like, I got a chainsaw if I have to cut down a little tree, but like if I'm thinking about, okay, well, how do I revegetate that? Like, I just, like, I see the trees that BlackRock planted along the skirt there, and like, I mean, everything grows super fast here, but like, presumably it's going to take a while to revegetate.
Speak into the mic, please.
35, 40 years. Okay, yeah.
Well, 35 to 40 years, and you'll have significant trees in there.
Okay.
Like an example down in some of the properties I've dealt with in here, I've taken the trees down, and the trees are already this big, and that was 25 years ago when I did some of these trees. So. Around here, the trees grow fast, and it is the rainforest, and it's opening up around this area. It actually.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
What I've been doing in the forest out here lately is actually making openings that big to open up the forest to help out the second growth forest, the bigger second growth forests, which are this big. They're too tight, and I've been working with redfish, and we go in and make openings, almost the size of what we're doing, well, at least the size of what we're doing there, to get the light down to the ground again.
But in that case, that's so new stuff can grow, not so people can park vehicles, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I understand. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to point out, like, a few of these trees we have made recommendations on like reducing the height, because the problem potentially could be that there's hazardous parts, because you want to keep people that are going in there safe. Sorry, so talking to Mike. So some of the recommendations are some of these 2 trees when you first drive in is just to do like reductions on them to keep them safe, so we can enjoy them, because ideally when you do reductions, when you do like modifications to trees to keep them safe, it creates habitat for wildlife, and the idea again is why we're wanting to retain these trees and do our best to because there's a lot of wildlife habitat available in these older trees, and that's kind of why David's going to these. He's told us that it's the recommendations are why we want to retain the old trees for the wildlife value as well, right? So even some of these are being modified to retain them, so they because they do get storm damaged.
May I just add a comment to this? While it's appreciative of the fact that, yes, these are going to be replanted and there is going to be revegetation, I think that we also all here present need to recognize that those lands are, under the community plan, under the OCP, designated for redevelopment. So we need to be realistic about that. The reason we own the land, the reason we're paying thousands of dollars a year on taxes is not to maintain those lands as a park for eternity. Rather, it's because there will be development, and the whole community is contemplating that there will be development there at some point in time. So what is the answer to all of this? I would suggest to you is that what we want to do is we want to take all reasonable steps to make certain that we don't put ourselves in a position whereby we're prevented from the orderly development in the future. And I'll maybe stop at that point in time. I think, if I may, I think you understand my point, and I'll maybe just drop it there. Unless there's any other question, I'm happy to sit down.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Anderson?
A quick one through the mayor. So we talked about, I lost my page here. I think it's Schedule 3E we addressed, but not A. So is there a way that we could word this to have a little more flexibility with the 7 trees so that we could say, you know, we don't know yet exactly what that number is, and we could come back to that?
I think the original reports had the word minimum 7 trees in it. Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So staff has been talking to the applicant as well as reviewing this. With respect to modifying the number of trees in the current permit as it's formulated, it's talking about the disturbed area as presented on the site plan. So if the site plan is being modified because additional trees outside of that area need to be modified, then the expanded site plan should be reviewed and looked at. So that's where staff is having the most difficulty with talking about removing. Even if we were to remove the limitation on the number of trees, the work would still be limited to the actual site plan as presented by the applicant. So working outside of that one would be beyond the scope of the temporary use permit because it's specific to the actual site. So if there are trees that need to be removed potentially outside of the actual site as presented, then that would need to be included within the modified temporary use permit. That's where we're having a little bit of trouble.
Would that come back to council then? I'm just wondering if there's a quicker way to do that. If these guys go in and they figure there's a tree that has to come down and there's no way around it, is there a way that they can have the certified arborist just come back to the district and say, hey, this is a safety issue, whatever, I mean, without having to go through like another public notice and on kind of thing? Is there
as the temporary use permit, it's temporary use permits are typically quite restrictive. They're very specific to, you're allowed to do this because it's not in compliance with zoning, generally speaking. So we have posted notice that it's approximately 850 square meters, right? That, there are 7 mature trees that are primarily affected by it. If there's a snag outside of the development area, that's not an issue, right? If anything that's existing that is a hazard tree, if it is a tree that becomes a hazard because of its entry into that site or that work zone, then that's something that we haven't contemplated within the temporary use permit. That's where we get a little bit tricky. And if the site expands, then you know, if it's if it only expands by a few meters, then it's not a big deal. But if it expands by 100 meters, then the notification to the public would need to be redone.
Right. So how does that work for you guys? Because I don't think it does say minimum. I think it just says 7 trees. So
We're not looking to expand the area.
right. No, I didn't think so either.
Yeah,
but
we're
just
not
in
looking
case.
to expand the area. All our concern is if there's a danger tree that's there,
Right.
we don't want to have a situation where someone shows up and slaps our hand and say, you've acted inappropriately.
So is there flexibility, Mr.
So
Morris, in that case?
with respect to existing danger trees, there shouldn't be an issue, right?
And that's the tree that I've already pointed out, 2 trees. Well, they're not even, they're, the ones, it's on a 45, and the top half of it's in the parking lot tied into a tree that we have to take out.
Yeah.
So what would happen, the tree would lay down, would cut it right at the line, put an X on it, and then that's the way we do it.
Yeah. So
WCB, it's a WCB rule we have to follow.
with respect to that it's a hazard tree. It needs to be dealt with. It's within, you know, partly within the actual the area, so that wouldn't be an issue. So that wouldn't be like removing a mature tree. You know, it's a hazard tree that happens to be in there. But if there's work that needs to happen outside of that, that's something else.
I can't answer to whether there is. All I'm saying is we have clearly defined boundary of what we want to accomplish. The decision on that really comes back to these gentlemen. That's not something that I have a call on.
Right.
Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant from council? Councillor Hoare.
I'm not sure it's a question for the applicant. I believe it might be for Joe and David. So you guys talked about opening clearings like this, Joe, for redfish when they're trying to get some more light down to the ground. Yeah. But I'm thinking about this clearing. Do we need to worry about, like, we're on the shore, wind damage, like potentially causing more danger trees outside of that parking lot? Like, because there's the protection of the forest, and so when you take a chunk of that away, do we need to worry about that, or is that, I'm just curious.
I think it's a good question, because that does happen in a forestry application when they do take out like a 30-hectare section of the forest, and you're left with edge trees that were cut down, and you have interior trees that don't have the root structure. But the kind of what's going on in this, the footprint is inside. It's very small, and these trees they're very wind damaged as it is there, because it's pretty harsh around here with the wind events. So I wouldn't be too concerned about this, but again, it may be to put into any dominant trees that we could prune to prevent, wind damage would be something that I think would be, if there was a dominant spruce or a dominant western red cedar, it might be an idea to prune these, for future retention or something. Not a bad idea.
Kind of keep them from becoming danger trees.
Yeah, and just to stop wind throw, I guess would be something that we could do.
I think it's a valuable point as well, because we've got on the trails, we've got people moving through there on a regular basis, and quite frankly, there is stuff adjacent to the trails that is really not that safe. So, that's an expanded part of the discussion here.
I just wanted to bring it up because I know that, the wind effect of clearing can be substantial.
I think this is a pretty small footprint on the grand scale, but yeah, I think it's definitely something to look into. I think it's a good idea for sure.
Okay, I think we'll move into the public input at this point. Are there any members of the public that are attending in person that would like to speak to this topic? Yes, go ahead and go up to the mic and just state your name and address, please.
Dear Mayor and councillors, I'm Iman Makaremi. I live here in Euclid.
What's your address, please?
And address is 1796 Rainforest Lane, right across Black Rock Resort, and directly affected by this motion. we sent a letter in as well in the spirit of protecting the forest. But what we hear today is actually quite disheartening. The first is that we hear from the applicants that they want to remove some old trees, basically part of the old growth forest, for the purpose of putting up a parking lot. I guess all of you should know the song. And we also know that it is not about just cutting some trees and that are 30 years old. Probably some of you watched the movie Rematrification a few days ago in Tofino. That is about how long these trees live after they actually fall down. So those trees that are going to be removed have a few hundred years to go still. So the idea of revegetation in the natural way, it's not going to happen. Let's be clear about that, to the way that the forest is protecting itself. So that said, it's also clear that the applicant doesn't have a clear long-term plan. There are many ifs in the long term, what's going to be. And also it's clear that there is no following of the zoning of the lot, what it was purposed for. As we heard today, it was about affordable housing plus resort accommodation. I don't know the exact terms, sorry about that. And the thoughts for that lot is apparently staff housing, which doesn't fall into the same zoning. So that's the second thing that also doesn't make sense with this. And again, it's also super counterintuitive to cut down some trees without any plans. And we also heard how difficult it is to get into that area to remove some of those trees. We are thinking about doing something really difficult for a temporary use case that, as the mayor said, is affecting some properties around the area as well. So I think this is not the best plan for placing some RVs and helping with the rebuilding and modifications to the Black Rock Resort. And as a member of the public, I oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public attending in person that would like to speak? Are there any members of the public that are attending on Zoom that would like to speak? Please click the raise your hand icon or press *9 if you're attending by phone.
We do not have any hands raised at this time on Zoom.
We have received correspondence in our agenda and the late agenda on the permit. Have we received any unpublished correspondence on this matter to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Yes, we have one correspondence item in the inbox right now. That correspondence item is from Barbara Schramm. It reads, "Dear Council, can we please ask the owners of Black Rock to speak whether they are willing to commit to pursue the route for the Wild Pacific Trail in front of the existing resort as a win-win solution for the trail route? A new route could remove the current access from a public corridor in a construction area. We further wonder if the number of trees removed in the proposed parking lot could be built in the style of the Whale Lot and Parks Canada at Florencia, trees preserved in lobes. Thanks, Barbara Schramm from the Wild Pacific Trail Society." I also understand that there's been a letter submitted by Iman, but I do not have it in my inbox right now. It's by Petra. I don't have either in the inbox here. So I think what I'd invite you to do is just read it into the mic.
Julie, I think we got it in the agenda.
Fabulous. Okay, so do you have Iman's in the late agenda there?
Yeah, well, all right. Unless it's somebody else who lives at your address.
It's a different...
In the crawl space.
Oh no, maybe not.
It's a
Sorry.
different address.
Yeah, this is from 1754 Rainforest Lane. My apologies.
So-
Yeah, this is from Sarah and Mark.
Yeah, I think rather than having me stumble through it, it's probably best in your own words.
Sorry.
I noticed that too.
Dear Mayor and Councillors, we are disheartened to hear about the request to use Lot 12 for a temporary parking lot by the Black Rock Resort and the prospect of the subsequent destructions of 850 square meters of what to us looks like a virgin ancient old growth forest. There are many reasons. For one, we live right across the street and walk the Wild Pacific Trail daily. We have made the Coolette our home because of its wild nature, and the rainforest is our favorite part. We also love that it is reflected in our address, the Rainforest Lane. As such, we walk by and see the lot daily and would be beyond saddened to see those gorgeous trees be cleared for a temporary 2-year benefit. They took hundreds, if not thousands of years to grow. In the meantime of global warming and climate change, when only less than 3% of BC's virgin old-growth forests remain, these trees represent one of the last lines of defense against climate change. We highly recommend the documentary Rematriation, which was ironically part of the Trees and Oceans Festival produced by several local nonprofits this past weekend, which documented the importance, the loss, and the fight to protect what is left. Beyond the immense ecological loss, Ucluelet is also a tourist destination. We run a small bed and breakfast and can tell you firsthand that our guests love the Pacific Wall Trail and already get lost on it precisely at the area around the Black Rock Resort. The trail is unclear there, and an additional destruction of the forest would only further compromise that experience. Why can we appreciate the same forest and turn it into a tourist attraction in areas like the Big Trees Trail on Mears Island, and still even consider cutting more of these ancient giants here in Ucluelet for mere temporary reasons? The ecological cost to the ecosystem is too great to ever justify it. We urge the Council to consider the ecological, local, natural, and economic and tourist value these old-growth forests have to all, locals and Canadian and international visitors alike. And do the right thing, save the trees. Let's not take the wild out of Wild Pacific Trail. Petra Niman, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public input? Nobody in person? Anyone on Zoom?
Please click the raise your hand icon if you'd like to speak. There are no hands raised on Zoom at this time.
Okay, thank you. And nothing on the community input address?
No, the most recent email we received is from Miss Barbara Schramm at 4:55 p.m.
Thank you. Question for staff. Since Schedule 3 requires some changes, does that mean that this has to go back to staff to do those changes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Behind the scenes, we've been working on a resolution to modify this so that we can move the temporary use permit along. The one question that we're wrestling with is the use of excavator, as the applicant indicated that might be problematic. What we might suggest is that we substitute prior to any site mobilization with, under the guidance of a certified arborist, the applicant will clearly delineate the limits of it so that they modify it a little bit so it's under the guidance of the arborists, and that way it's the protection of the trees outside of the project area are protected, and we have a certified arborist that's overseeing that. So it's a minor change into the suggestion from Councillor Hoare with respect to that. clause within the permit.
Okay, thank you. And then there will be an additional item to retain a berm of organics.
So, provided that the organics are retained within the permit area, then there's no prohibition on retaining the organics on site. So I don't think there isn't a need for additional wording into the permit to allow that activity, provided it's within that delineated area.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was the specifying 7 mature trees. We're leaving that as it is.
And we would be able to remove that with an amendment to the temporary use permit.
Okay. So we're looking at a revised motion from staff?
Correct. Mr. Rottenberg is on it. I think he almost has it done.
And that can be read as one motion, Mr. Rotenberg?
Yeah. Excuse me.
Yes, as well. Of course, the subsequent motion would have to be that council issue or approve the issuance of the temporary use permit as amended, because you're now amending it now. So the idea here would be that you amend the permit as presented in the report. That would allow staff to substitute those words, all of which, for reference, are on page 65 of your agenda package under Schedule 3. So it's Condition A and Condition E that we're looking at here.
Schedule 3.
Under Schedule 3, Terms of Temporary Use Permit Conditions.
Can I just double check that second point? I'm just reading it out loud, and that would read as prior to any, under the direction of a certified arborist, the applicant will clearly, should, just so we're by the book, should we remove prior to any as well?
That would be correct.
Would council like to make a motion?
Do we do this one first, or is it the original?
Yes, this one has to be done first, correct? Yes.
Okay, I'll hit this. All right. I would recommend that council amend Schedule 3, a temporary use permit TUP 22-12 as presented in report number 23-112 as follows. Number 1, Condition A, delete the words 7 mature trees. And 2, Condition E, delete the words prior to any site mobilization and insert the word under the direction of a certified arborist. Excuse me, just correct that. Words. Yeah.
So you'll just have to correct that. Insert the words.
And insert the words under the direction of a certified arborist.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Kennington, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. And now we go back to the one on page 18. But we have to insert the word amended, correct?
As amended.
As amended. Would someone like to make that motion? It's under A, page 18.
I can do that one as well.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
I would recommend, I move that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue a temporary use permit as amended TUP 22-12 to allow the construction of a temporary parking lot and construction staging area for a period of 2 years on Lot 12 Marine Drive, subject to the conditions included in the permit.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. All right, that concludes the first item on our agenda. The next item is 6.2, Peninsula Road Safety and Revitalization Design and Financing. This report will be presented by the Director of Engineering Services. Welcome, Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to receive some feedback from Council and direction concerning the Peninsula Road project. Along the way, I'll share completed activities of over the last 6 months in the project. Most importantly, I believe for Council will be updates on project design and project cost estimates as well. Staff have prepared some options for Council's consideration, including a staff recommendation. And then lastly, we'll talk about next steps and potential schedule. Next slide, please. Last council saw this project was 6 months ago in March of 2023. And at that council meeting, council heard that the cost for the 1.5 kilometer project were in excess of the budget. And staff recommended that the project be reduced down to a manageable segment. And then council directed staff to return back with some recommendations on what that potential segment for construction could be. So in preparation to make that recommendation, staff have been considering all the options and looking at the project scope. And there's a particular area, a 4-block section in between Bay Street and Seaplane Base Road that is presumably, we believe, the most advantageous for the next steps. Really for 3 reasons. The first is that our grant is written specifically for that section in between Seaplane Base Road and Bay Street. Second, the storm infrastructure has deteriorated beyond repair in that area, and Modi has provided contribution for replacement specific to that area. And lastly, this is the central spine for connectivity along Peninsula Road, and it's also ripe for beautification and revitalizing. In the last 6 months, all the site analysis have been completed, needed to move the project forward. The phrase "no stone left unturned" applies well here. We've taken a look at the eelgrass in the harbor and how the storm system could affect that. We've taken a look at archaeological impacts and cultural sensitive items that could be affected by the project. Peninsula Road has been drilled and cored to look at the subsurface of the road and potential impacts in the future. All those impacts are deemed to be manageable and could be risks that could be mitigated, and we're confident that it's time to move forward. Next slide, please. In preparation for this 4-block section, this recommendation in between Seaplane Base Road and Bay Street, the project has been vertically integrated to include the storm system and the boulevard works as well. There's advantages of doing this as well. Cost savings, improvements in functionality with the storm system and boulevard works, and final design and quality improvements work much, much better, as we've been sharing along this project course when the two are integrated together. So what's in scope is Seaplane Base Road to Bay, everything in the middle, and what's out of scope is anything north of Seaplane Base Road and Bay Street. Design advancements have occurred for the boulevard works. Most notably, a lot of capital and attention has been dedicated to the junctions and intersections in between Seaplane Base Road and Bay Street, and capital has also been dedicated to the boulevards in between those junctions and intersections. There's an interest in sort of a allocation, I guess a distribution of capital on the western side of the boulevards, and a lot of what's on the eastern side of the boulevards in that section has been left for a future phase. I have 3 design slides ahead of us that will show that in more detail. As well, advancement of the stormworks has been completed. Really, both the boulevard and the stormworks are within a couple of works of being completed once approved. What's happening with the storm system is proposed complete removal and replacement in between Seaplane Base Road and Leach Road. So that would include the complete removal of the existing trunk system, replacement, new laterals and catch basins to pick up the large catchment areas, and of course a large new outfall, if approved, to move and convey all of that storm water. Next slide, please. Cost estimates have recently been completed for both the Boulevard Works and the storm system. The Boulevard Works has the same cost estimate the council has seen before, $1.5 million. That remains within the budget and nothing new for council there. What is certainly new is that there's been a cost estimate for the nearing completed storm system, and that value for construction is $1.5 million. Council will recall that previously the replacement of the storm work was entirely unfunded. We funded the design portion, but never the construction portion. So if approved and if agreeable, the construction costs for both works would be in the range of $3 million. And included that's just for construction. So with design and 30% contingencies and taxes and everything included, if approved, there's a total project figure of about $3.6 million. And I have more information on those details in just a moment. In the last 6 months, district staff have been working with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. We've been working on goals alignment and moving this shared project forward, or shared asset rather, forward. Most recently, with completed design works, the ministry has agreed to contribute to the replacement $500,000. So that $500,000 would go on top of the $100,000 Modi has already contributed to this project. So Modi is now in agreement to fund $600,000 towards the replacement of the stormworks. As well, Modi has communicated with the district that they've earmarked in their 2024 budget $4 million for the resurfacing of the highway. The district staff haven't made a decision, built a plan, communicated with council, or any of those important steps yet to move that forward. So more to come in the weeks and months ahead on resurfacing of that highway. Peninsula Road challenges and lessons learned in the big picture here. This has really illuminated that streetscape projects really need to be inclusive of above ground and below ground works, particularly in Peninsula Road, which is a central transportation corridor as well as a central utilities corridor for the district. This project deals with the storm network now proposed in the problem area, but there are still water and sanitary lines in this project scope that aren't being dealt with now, and they will be a topic of conversation in the years ahead. So staff will have to continue further developing mechanisms to fund and finance these projects as we go forward, and as well work with the ministry to develop a transportation, a maintenance replacement plan for this new asset that's about to be constructed. Next slide, please. So I have 3 slides here that are summary level designs, really, and council, you have this in your agenda as well. From a high level, what we're looking at is a bird's eye view looking down at Peninsula Road and Seaplane Base Road. And what we can see here is new boulevards and a new storm system. So this marks the beginning of the project in between Seaplane and Bay. On the boulevard side, we see a multi-use path getting extended past Howlers. There's new parallel parking proposed to be installed. That multi-use path transitions into a bidirectional bike lane, and that bike lane is protected by boulevard swell and plantings for safety. The storm system is proposed here to be completely removed and replaced. So that large black line underneath the bike path is the central trunk. So that will come out and be installed brand new for a 100-year flood. Those are the laterals and catch basins that pick up the highway, the catchment areas, and the boulevards as well, all integrated to work together. Next slide, please. Similarly, a bird's eye view looking down at an intersection that receives a lot of capital. And so we see Leach Road and Peninsula Road in front of Image West here. This is the bidirectional bike lane being extended up and down the road. Again, with the boulevard and plantings for safety and for beautification. New crosswalk here, and quite a significant improvement for the storm system. This is the proposed replacement of the large outfall that conveys all the water into the harbor. You'll notice just in this slide and others that there's a lot of capital being allocated to the western side of this project, and not a lot of capital being allocated to the eastern side of Peninsula Road. That would be a future phase at council's discretion. Next slide, please. So this is the last one that I have. Again, bird's eye view looking down at Bay Street. On the left, there's sort of a before, and on the right, perhaps a after photo of what this could look like. So this is the multi-use path, the bidirectional bike lane moving into Bay Street, where it's mixing with pedestrians. Those concrete circles are mixing circles installed for safety purposes to safely mix pedestrians and cyclists in the same place. It's really a visual element to bring them together safely. There's a little bit of realignment happening here. We see the center line moving to try to start to square this very awkward intersection as best we can in this round. There's also some traffic mitigation being installed in front of the liquor store. That's that bump out that we see. And that's an area of high incidence with traffic accidents happening there. So we'll try to reduce and prevent that with that bump out. I guess most importantly is how to move this all forward. So next slide, please. Options summary for council's consideration. There's 3 here. Option A, council could endorse the design, the 4-block segment, and the phase 1 for construction. Council could also consider allocating the full funding for the storm replacement, less Modi's contribution. And council could direct staff to proceed with tendering. In option B, very similar to option A, council can endorse the 4-block segment, phase 1 for construction, and allocate partial funding for the storm replacement. A little bit of a cost savings option there is available, and as well direct staff to proceed with tendering. In option C, council could direct staff to provide alternative options for phase 1 and defer all capital investment in the storm system for a later date, and defer tendering for a later date once alternative options could be prepared and considered and provided to council. Next slide, please. In option A, if council supports advancement of this, capital must be allocated to fund the storm system replacement. The storm system is estimated at $1.7 million, and that's all in with taxes, engineering fees, contingencies, etc. As I mentioned, Modi has provided $600,000 towards the contribution of the storm system replacement, and the district has already provided $83,000 previously. So that leaves a funding shortfall of $1,040,000 that's unfunded for the storm system replacement. If approachable or if wanting to be entertained by council, a financing strategy has been prepared for council's consideration. To fund that $1.04 million, a portion of the BC Growing Communities Fund could be allocated towards this project. Staff will recall that the district received a $1.5 million grant earlier in the year, and that was for general infrastructure repairs. So if $1.04 million was dedicated to replacing the storm system, the BC Growing Communities Funds would still be available to replace the Mercantile water line, and then the rest would be dedicated towards the storm system. And then the project would be fully funded. Next slide, please. In option B, very similar to option A, council could endorse the forward momentum, the 4-block segment for advancement, and allocate partial funding towards the replacement of the storm system, and then direct staff to proceed with tendering. In this option, council could remove remove the installation of the outfall now and defer it for a later date. The outfall is a very expensive item here, estimated at about $200,000 to $250,000. So council could not allocate that capital this time and earmark it for a later date. So there'd be a cost savings. That move would reduce the district needed contribution from $1,040,000 to $840,000. Next slide, please. In option C, council could direct staff to prepare alternative options for phase 1 and defer all capital investment and tendering for a later date. In this option, the storm system would remain as is, and the boulevards would remain as is. I'm sharing with you a whole bunch of similar Peninsula Road projects or photos here, but it sort of highlights the need for beautification, I suppose, in some areas. So next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Oh, thanks. So next steps here are to, of course, integrate council's decision into our strategy. Staff have also requested additional funds from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and we're still waiting to hear back from their decision. If they do decide to contribute more funds, it could reduce the need for the district's allocation. We would complete the designs. The designs can be completed within a couple of weeks, and then prepare tender for end of August or early September. From that point, we would be issuing a tender call, if approved, in September, and then we'd be back here in front of council with a request for authorization of a construction contract in the October council meeting. From there, we'd be into construction beginning November and into the spring. So, with all that said, I'm available to answer any questions, council.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Any questions for staff? Councillor Hoare?
I just want to confirm, so this would be, if we funded this, I cannot. Basically, the east side of the road would remain unchanged, and it would just be changes to the west side of the road, other than those crosswalk things at various points.
Through
like
the mayor.
Lychee. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Having seen the condition of that outfall pipe, I really don't like the idea of not replacing that. I'll just say that right out loud right now. And the fact that we have collapsing pipe under the boulevard as it stands along the side of that, the west side of that road. So I think deferral is just putting it on somebody else's shoulders later, and the price will only go up. I would like to comment that I like the bump out at Bay Street and the realignment, because this weekend, every day that I walked past that corner, somebody was parked right across the crosswalk. So the bump out would at least make that a little bit more difficult.
But not impossible.
Well, nothing is impossible, and we've all seen what happens in August. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that we were basically leaving the east side untouched.
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. You're seeing that clearly.
Any other questions? Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor. Question about the deferral of the outfall pipe. Would that, if it was done later, and I agree with Councillor Hoare that it shouldn't be, but let's just say that it was, is the road going to be paved over something that, and then need to be ripped up again to do that if we defer it? Or would we be putting in sort of a placeholder pipe that we wouldn't have to rip it up later, because it seems like we shouldn't pay for the same thing twice?
Through the mayor, there's probably a couple of options that could be implemented if that were the case. To your point, a very large sleeve could be installed, and perhaps the outfall could be sort of sleeved through that larger piece. That said, it'd probably be most optimum to just install it, remove and replace as is, and we'd have our most significant utility cut certainly in the district for some time. Or we'd be perhaps looking at deferring paving until we could have that outfall replaced. So a couple of options there to work with that scenario. As council knows, that outfall is in very, very poor condition, and it serves as one of the most important points to convey water out to the harbor. It's one of the largest outfalls, and it's just an important part of this project.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Anderson?
Through the mayor, I have a question. So am I correct? I just looked at the funding for this. It seems to, I agree with Councillor Hoare as well, that it's probably not the best idea to defer this as the cost goes up. And I think it's important to note, if I'm correct, there's no tax dollars going towards this. This is almost fully funded by several different sources, whether it's the Growing Communities Fund, MOTI, and there was what else was in there? But in any case, there's no tax dollars going to this, right?
Through the mayor. So what's funding this project exactly is there's $750,000 from the Canadian Communities Revitalization Fund.
Right.
There's $1 million from gas tax. There's $140,000 from Resort Municipality. $100,000 from Modi, $500,000 from Modi, $83,000 from the BC Growing Communities Fund, and pending for consideration, $1.04 million from the BC Growing Communities Fund.
Right. Okay. So, and then there's also a request potentially for more from Moti that I guess we could save some of that Growing Communities Fund, but by the District of Ucluelet making the contribution to that, it doesn't preclude us from being in the running for potentially getting money from Moti, or that request that's pending. Is that correct? Or or by doing the contribution, does that take that off the table?
Through the mayor, it's a good question, one that I don't have a direct answer for, but I'll just sort of walk out on the diving board, if I may. So I don't believe that the district's funding would influence the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's funding for this project. What they have is about $4.5 million dedicated to come to the district within the next couple of years, just for Peninsula Road improvements. Some of that's being earmarked now for the storm system. So we've built a pretty strong case now about the ownership of the storm system, district versus Modi, to prepare us for just this junction now, this point in time, where we can say the district owns this and the ministry owns that. So there's also a really good argument here to say that if the storm system isn't replaced, the ministry has a very hard challenge just replenishing their asset. Right. So what we would like to see in the request is that we all contribute 50% to this project. The district contributes 50% and Modi contributes 50%. So I guess that's my answer there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I had another quick question. Was I should know the answer to this because you actually physically took us out there to show us how this works, so I should know this. But do the other utilities like sewage and water line parallel the storm in that case, and so eventually it will have to be dug up again, right? Is that right? And I know that's probably excessively expensive to do everything at one time and impossible, but is that how that works? Are they all together in a parallel line there?
Through the mayor, so yes and no. There's a sanitary line that is within this project area, and it runs from the corner of Norris Street to Leach Road, and that sanitary line runs in a convenient place for this project. It's right underneath the boulevard, really earthworks that are proposed to be installed in this project. So it's available, and we've taken a good look at this, that it could be, when needed, unearthed and replaced with a certain amount of rework happening to the project that we're doing now. So it's not it's not nothing, but it isn't significant. There is so that sanitary line is now starting to cause some problems with upstream developments, and so it's undersized, it's too small, and that will need to be looked at in the years ahead. We have some plans to address that that we'll talk about in the months ahead, or anytime you like, and but. There is and then the water infrastructure is on the other side of the Peninsula Road, so we catch a break there with water. So the storm system is right underneath the new bidirectional bike path. The sanitary line is underneath the greenworks of this boulevard and can be replaced later with some damage, but it's manageable. And then the water line is on the other side of Peninsula Road.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh.
Great report. Thank you. And I agree, the cost of capital projects like this is not going to go down in the future. So deferring a portion of it, I don't think is the right idea. So we have a couple of recommendations. Would council like to make a motion?
Where is it?
Right up top.
Top of 83.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Oh my god. Stand by. I'm building up a head of steam here. It's gonna be good.
It's a long one.
I'll move that council endorse the design of Peninsula Road safety and revitalizations as presented for Phase 1 advancement. I'll further move that council allocate up to $1,040,000 from the BC Growing Communities Fund, BCGCF, for construction of the storm system replacement.
I think we need to do these individually?
Probably best to do them one at a time.
Okay, so we'll start with that first one.
I'll second the first one.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, that carries. Go ahead.
Do I have to reread the second one?
Yes.
I'll move that council allocate up to $1,040,000 from the BC Growing Communities Fund, BCGCF, for construction of the storm system replacement.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, that carries.
I will further and finally move that council direct staff to prepare and issue a tender for construction of the Peninsula Road safety and revitalization works and storm system replacement as presented.
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll see you in October.
The next item is 6.
We break
Okay.
3 minutes.
Could we have a motion to have a 5-minute break?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare, Councillor Mafti, all in favor? None opposed, that carries. our meetings, at least.
Just like a little bit, maybe. Just a little bit. Just enough to keep it interesting.
All right, we'll bring this meeting back to order at 6:08. The next item is 6.3 Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative Request. This report will be presented by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before Council is a follow-up report with respect to the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative. They've made a number of requests to Council for support for their employee housing project. 3 items were identified for clarity that was requested by Council with respect to construction costs. If the project was as formulated, we'd be considered as assistance to business, so whether or not Council can actually support it. And then confirmation of the actual request from the cooperative. So before Council in the report is a very high-level summary of the projected costs for the project as presented by the cooperative. Essentially, they're looking at, based off of a 40-unit development, their forecasted costs are $5,155,000 or $128,875 per unit, inclusive of development and construction costs. Each unit is proposed at 450 square feet for an estimated construction cost of $286 per square foot. So that includes the land, servicing, and all construction costs and utilities. The funding sources are proposed via the government grants of $100,000 per unit. Now, the organization is not in a position at this point in time to actually make those funding requests, so they have been in contact with the ministries, advocating for support for the project, been talking to the MLAs and MPs, and they have letters of support for the project. But they can't make the formal request until they actually have land and a fully realized project before they can make the applications. And they're hoping that with an allocation of land that they would be able to move that forward. The units are also to be funded through mortgages, so $28,875 per unit or $1.155 million. So those are the high-level costs that have been provided to staff from the organization as their preliminary costing for the development. So each of these units are a separate building of about 450 square feet. With respect to the request to the district, we have worked with the organization, and they have been able to provide clarity. Staff would still recommend that we get our solicitors to verify our findings, but we're fairly confident that the way that they've reorganized their bylaws and the cooperative, that assistance to business would not be a jeopardy in this case. So council could fairly safely move forward with providing assistance to the organization. The way that they've managed this is by allowing an unrestricted access to the memberships, and then the memberships are distributed via the board to the applicants for the development for the housing units. The one concern that staff have identified in the report that we've indicated to the board is that there could be a conflict of interest between the board members who have control of allocating those units and that distribution process, and it could be a perception issue or could be an actual issue, but it's not one that would preclude the municipality from providing support. So it's more of an administrative query that staff would like to see more details on, and ideally a separation between the who's on the board and who's getting the units, because you could, in theory, award your own business. If you're a board member, you could award your organization or needs first over others, because there's no parameters that would limit that at this point in time, as it has been presented to the municipality. So that would be a concern, but it's not something that would limit support as previously stated. The last bit is we received clarification with respect to what the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative is actually requesting from the municipality. And then we went into a little bit more details on that request. So at this time, they're not asking for any cash contributions. They're asking for land and a possible tax exemption. With respect to the land request, they're looking for somewhere to build this development. Staff with the planning department have gone into detail trying to find different areas where this is possible, where the municipality has land. We have, as council may recall, very limited land reserves available to the municipality. There are two possible locations. One is the water tower lot just up on Matterson, below the Matterson water tower. That lot is significant in size, just over 5 acres, which would easily fit the 2.63 acre development that is being proposed for the 40 units. The challenge with that site is the development costs for road, pedestrian, sanitary, water, and hydro servicing. So based on staff's very high level look at the numbers, those numbers for the servicing and site servicing would have to increase significantly to allow for the development to happen in those that location. We had an initial discussion with a representative from the cooperative, and they did agree that it might be out of the realm of possibility. Although I do hear that they are reconsidering that on other options and other plans, but we have not seen those at this point in time to be able to weigh in on it, and if that would bring the costs down enough to allow them to build in that location while maintaining this type of price point. The second piece of land is behind Public Works yard. Now this land is 1.44 acres, so it's smaller than the requested 2.63 for the 40 units. It could hold about 20 units. This one is a very serviceable lot. It's relatively flat. It's a it's a good location in the community. But staff have significant concerns about allocating this to any other purpose other than a municipal servicing and future growth for the municipality. So the municipality doesn't have anywhere else to grow with respect to Public Works. Public Works backs onto this site. We'll need to expand Public Works if we're looking, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 30 years down the road. As the community grows, as the needs of the services that we provide increase, it is likely that the Public Works yard is going to need a little bit more space. It's not a huge area at the current time, and allocating that lot to a permanent housing development means that it's no longer on the table. And you would have to either do 2 separate works yards or relocate Public Works into an entire new location. And as previously noted, the district doesn't have any other lands that are outside of the inundation zone and suitable for industrial uses. The rest of the land that we own are residential lots and or park. So there's really nowhere else for us to go when we need to expand Public Works yard. So staff is not recommending that piece of land, although it is definitely developable. It'd be the cheapest one to access for servicing. Staff is really not recommending council give consideration to it because we're going to need that in the future. And if we give it away now, we're going to have to purchase land in the future to replace it, and then deal with either multiple sites for operations or a full relocation of the public works yard to an alternate site, which would be significantly higher in cost. With respect to the tax exemption, there is a possibility that the municipality can provide a tax exemption. At this time, we would staff isn't providing any recommendation with respect to that because we don't know what it would look like. We don't know what the value would be because we don't know the lot or the total cost of the project. So it is a possibility, although we do have a caveat in there suggesting that, by not providing the property tax on those sites, the residents that would invariably live on that site are not contributing to the services that they're using on an ongoing basis. So we're reducing our ability to actually fund the services that they are relying on. So it's a possibility, but one that staff would not recommend going into lightly. Other organizations and developments could then also make that request, and it could cascade and be very difficult for council to say to no to other housing developments, which could also be looking for tax exemptions. And funding our services has to be done somehow, and property taxes are the way that we currently do it. With that, at this point in time, staff is recommending that we advise that the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative, that unfortunately we don't have suitable land and are unable to provide that land availability at this point in time. With that, if council has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. You have indicated that that group is now reconsidering the land above by the water tower.
I don't have any real information on it. The one of the applicant representatives stopped by just before the council meeting started and indicated that they had some thoughts on it, but that's as far as we got.
Great. I'm quite impressed with this group because there were so many stumbling blocks for so long with all of this, and now it looks like one by one they're kind of being moved aside, like the supporting a single business option, which I agree that our lawyers should sort of look that over, but at first glance it looks like the way they've restructured it's open for anybody. And the fact that their board should have another element of oversight so that there is no bias or conflict of interest, and that's certainly doable. So it really comes down to the land. And I don't know, do other councillors have some thoughts?
Well, is this thoughts or questions at this point?
Either. Councillor Kennington?
Now that we're discussing the costs of all these things, I think it's important to understand that there's opportunity costs, and the development of this nature has less than half the density of our lowest density lot at 0.17. So a single family lot is 0.35 typically. So we're taking whatever land we have and we're applying the lowest possible density. So we're losing an opportunity to have, if we went with multifamily, if we were to give the same land to someone that was going to do a multifamily development at 1.5 times, we would have 9 times as much affordable housing as with this proposal. So given that we only have 2 identified pieces of land, one which has outrageous servicing costs and one that we need for ourselves, I think it would be a mistake to allocate any of our district lands to a project that with such low returns, because we have one shot at this with the water tower site. That should be an apartment building. It distributes the infrastructure costs over multiple units and gets us more housing. So while I think it's great to think outside of the box and to try and come up with a solution, the solution is a little bit long in the tooth now, and things have changed. Construction costs have changed. Housing needs have changed. They've become greater. And, I think it would be a real mistake to give district land to such a low density project. And those are my thoughts on it. And I have conveyed this several times to different members of PRHDC. So this is not
Thank-
getting sprung on anybody.
No, thank you, Councillor Kennington. Councillor Mafty?
I had a number of chats with different folks behind this push. I see the need for it. I see the desire for it. I see the enthusiasm behind it. It's really hard for me to shoot it down. I wish it could fall in line with something that makes a little bit more sense. The points that Councillor Kennington made, I don't think are lost on anyone. And I do think it behooves us to consider the realities of what else we can do with the land. So the one side of it, as I hear about the water tower lot and the possibility of expanding the public works, it's like, okay, but right now that's just empty land, and someone has an idea of how to put it to use and to put it to a use that the community would benefit from. But I do think that might be a little bit short-sighted, and so I'm really reluctant to sort of drive the final nail into the coffin. Although considering how long this has been bouncing back and forth, I don't think anything will be the final nail, which I'm glad for. And I guess I would just sort of throw this out there to proponents of this project that maybe there's a way to reconsider the design. I think these units are really appealing. I see the appeal. I don't think they're practical for the reasons that Councillor Kennington laid out. So I guess right now I'm still in favor of the project, but I think it needs to sort of morph into something that makes more sense and is more in tune with the realities of how little space we have and how much emphasis we should put on density moving forward, and the cost implications of density, which I think are in favor of the development of something like this regardless.
So aim for density, which will bring the building costs down.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's no debate that density is the best use of the land and also the economically viable option. And so if there's a way, that the objectives of this proposal can fit in with a high density structure, apartment building, like that, that's it. It's not going to be like a beehive. It's going to be an apartment building. So if they can do it as an apartment building, then I think that would be great. And so I hope that there's a way to rethink that and revisit that.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate. I've talked to a couple of the fellows from PRHTC and Mr. Rouleau and Mr. Olawa, and the progress that they made has been pretty incredible. I totally agree. And it's the idea is needed, but there is a couple sticking points like what we're talking about. And at the end of the day, as Councillor Kennington and Mafty mentioned, there's a precious commodity is the land that we have, and it belongs to all the members of Ucluelet. So we have to treat it as a precious commodity and not, we have to be really careful about what we do. But I really like the idea, and I see where it's going. And I think it's needed. I mean, the other sticking point that I have, and I don't want to go off topic here, but the other thing would be is there is a bit of an air of conflict, just being a private entity, receiving the land, and then if there were members or people who had memberships that weren't from Ucluelet, like we're talking the other end of the peninsula, Tofino, that's a bit problematic in my mind as well, because we're sort of, if we're giving the land, we're footing a good hunk of the bill and potentially making it easier for a business that's not part of Ucluelet to house their employees. So for me, that could be a possible sticking point. But again, these are all things that I think could potentially be worked out, and I don't think it's all for naught. And but yeah, exactly what you guys said with what the other councillors said about the land being a precious commodity, I agree with.
Thank you. Councillor Hoare.
Well, I've been a proponent of density being a solution for things, and for a big part of this housing issue, sitting in the seat for 5 years. So I fully agree with Councillor Kennington on this one. It's bang for your buck, and using that water tower lot, if we did allocate the land for such a low density thing, it really takes away what we could do. And I feel like there is the potential with that lot. Also, I do believe we allocated a little bit of the Public Works lot to the Strawberry Island, the Marine Research Center. They now are storing things on part of that lot. So not only do we need to expand in it, but we would have to kick somebody off it that we just let onto it. So I really can't support allocating the land. There's just too many, not quite there, but close. It's really interesting to see how this has morphed over the last 5 years too. It has changed, and as the mayor said, a lot of the problems have been surmounted. But the problem the district has is a lack of land. And we just don't have a spot to just plunk it. An easy spot to plunk it, and I wish we did.
I wish we had more land to do that. And Seaplane Base is not viable because it's in the inundation zone, as well as having no sewage line going there. So, so kudos to this group for forging ahead. You're not quite there yet, but I wouldn't give up. Possibly Area C would have some land that this could be done on. I'm not sure. Possibly the group has looked at that. But yeah, I'm really proud of how far they've come, but it's just not quite there yet, especially because of the density issue or lack thereof. I would allow that if you'd like, Mr. Rouleau.
Yeah, hi, my name is Louis Rouleau. I'm at 944 Peninsula Road in Ucluelet. And I'd just like to thank staff and council for listening to us and hanging in for all those years that we were working on this. And I understand the whole density thing. Marilyn and I had a good discussion a while back, and she turned me on to Mint Tiny Homes. And I've been talking with, I've been in contact with them. The cool thing about them is they have really good frames on them that they're legal to tow on the road. So I was thinking with the water tower land, I don't think we're going to need 2.65 acres. I think we could fit 40 units quite a lot closer together, because these things with their frames don't need foundations or anything. They could be put on pads, of gravel pads that could be put in with the small machines that make the trails, and then there would be trails down to a parking lot down on the level property. So it's something I think I'd really like to pursue, just to get you the numbers and stuff. But what I really need is a commitment from you guys that you're in favor of the project. And I would just like to suggest that the only way this is going to work to get the funding is if we have something that we can give to Lisa Helps, because she is the ear to the Prime Minister, to the Premier for housing development. And I'm glad that you recognize the difference between staff housing and low-cost housing. What we're recommending is, staff housing that's going to be permanent. And what Mr. Lawrence left out in his thing was that the land behind the village, one of the proposals they wanted to do was to make staff housing for contractors, which is a good idea. But here we're on the same problem. This problem is not going to go away. We have to deal with it. I'm excited that we're going to get cell phone coverage in Highway 4. I'm excited that we're going to upgrade all of this stuff. But what I really worry about is the people that are servicing us. The clinics, where do they put their doctors that they need them? Could we get a dentist in town? Parks is always looking for places to house people. So it's not just businesses, it's employers. Any employer can become a member of the Pacific Housing Rim Development Co-op. This is non-profit. There's a lot of people that are going to come to you that want to make a shitload of, that want to make a lot of money developing stuff. But this is a non-profit thing. So it's the cheapest thing. Like I said, these houses, the mint houses are probably the cheapest accommodation you're going to get for building per square footage. And so I have a proposal that you lease that land to us for $1 for a year. And if we can't come up with the funding to make the project work, then we're done. But, give me that support right now, and then I can take that to the Premier. I can take that to the thing that you've made a commitment to give us that opportunity, that we can lease that land for a year to figure out what the project's going to be, because you can't figure out anything until you have the land. So let's look at that, and that's what I'm asking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rouleau. We can't make motions on the fly like that, unfortunately, but we can refer it back to staff to take a look and see if this new option might be viable. Because I think in theory we're all supportive of having employee or staff housing here in Ucluelet. It's the employers are going to be the ones managing that. Yeah. So we have a recommendation in front of us, but then we could add another motion to refer it back to staff. Is that correct, Mr. Lawrence?
Yes, council can make a recommendation to direct staff to continue to work with the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative. We can do that regardless. So staff is always available to work with our nonprofit entities and community groups to help further on their projects. So I don't think a resolution is required to continue that engagement process with the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative. Although if council wishes to have that on the books, then a resolution would return on the tracker.
So I think we should make a motion then. It doesn't have to be as specific as what you've just stated, Mr. Rouleau, but could I have a motion to return this project to staff to work with the proponent to come up with potential options?
If I may, Madam Mayor, if you give us just 2 minutes here, you could probably proceed with the first resolution if you wish. And then Mr. Rottenberg and I can work on a follow-up resolution for you. I'm
Okay.
Joey's shaking his head at me, so just 1 second, please.
So the staff recommendation is that council direct staff to advise the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative that the district does not have suitable land available for their project. I think making that motion and then referring the matter back to staff is a little bit odd.
I think we do not have suitable land available for their project as presented. But they are looking at a new option.
Can I jump in here just while Joey's typing over there? It seems to me, I know that this has been bouncing back and forth way before my time, but it really seems like this is kind of like a hot potato thing. And I understand the frustration from the proponent. They keep coming back to the table and saying, okay, well, what about this? What about this? I also see a lot of legitimate concerns that what's been brought to the table so far just doesn't work. And it's not personal, and it's not because people don't want to see this happen. It's because what's been brought to the table isn't tenable. And so I'm wondering if at this point, if indeed people do feel that this is something that we need, if this is something that council thinks they're close enough that we're getting somewhere, maybe we just need to come up with like a few metrics where it's like, okay, we need to hit this density, and this is like a number, and you either do it or you don't. And then, figure out a few conditions to give the proponent something to work around, because I completely appreciate the point that until you have like the bird in the hand, no one else is going to fund it. Everyone's always going to be like, well, get them to say yes first, get them to give you the money first. So if we say, look, the proposal that's come to us isn't workable because it's a very low density, be like, all right, hit this metric. If you can make that happen, and if you can keep the cost within this window, like give them some boundaries, and then they can work with that and either come back and say, well, all right, we think we can do it, or forget about it, it's not going to happen. I'm just a little bit worried that if we keep being like, well, come back to us with something else, then they're going to come back to us with something else, and then we're going to say, well, this isn't quite right either. And so maybe we need to start actually hammering out what we want here on our end.
That makes sense to me.
So I'd say, to what's been brought to the table, I think I'd feel pretty comfortable saying like, nope, it's not going to work. But I really don't want that to come across as a don't stop trying. But I also don't want to be like, well, keep guessing. I think the density is a big one, and the cost is a big one. And if we can figure out a way to keep, I'd be curious to hear Councillor Kennington's perspective on that.
My feeling on the matter is that as presented and going through, it always seemed like a bit of a Band-Aid solution when we're looking for a cure. And at this point, all hands on deck, focusing on affordable and attainable housing for all people, no restrictions, is what's going to get us out of this mess. Because if we start, piecemeal doing this and that, and coming up with these quick solutions with temporary housing that doesn't stand the test of time, all the same unit size, like there's just so many things about it that don't make sense. To say, for me, it's a back to the drawing board, like completely and utterly. If you want to start a housing co-op, start a housing co-op, but we can't have 450 square foot units and expect a doctor to come to town and stay in it with his family. That's not going to happen. So there's a product mix that's missing in this. It's just a one-off of everything, repeat, and it's only going to solve a few smaller issues. But you could build 1,000 of these units, but then there'd be a bunch of them empty. Like, we don't know exactly how many 450 square foot units. People are living in vans, but this is basically a van with
without the wheels.
Without the wheels, like it's not the right solution. And like the problem is so huge and requires such a big fix that, again, my problem comes down to land and infrastructure and all these things. It's like what this brings to light is that we really do need a bigger solution than this. And so, we can keep sending them back, but like it's not going to change what's being presented to us as far as the quality of the units, the size of the units, the density of the units, and the fact that they're asking for district land for low density development. Whatever it is, it's going to be one story, and they're going to be separated 10 feet minimum for fire. You're only going to fit so many on a piece of land. We have to go vertical, and we have to stick them together, because the other thing that these units do in their present layout is the carbon footprint for them is massive, because they're one story, they're on a pad, they need a road in front of them. You're instantly just increasing the amount of infrastructure, increasing the amount of pipe, increasing the amount of water and sewer. Everything is increased, the length of it, and we all know how expensive that's getting. And then there's the ongoing maintenance of those infrastructure pieces that are going to be on us as well, because if we're giving that and they're not being taxed, who's going to pay for that, and who's benefiting from it? I just for years I've been following the project, and it never made sense to me. So rather than stringing people along, I'm just going to go on record and saying I don't think this works, and I don't think it's the right fit for Ucluelet, and I don't think it's the solution to the housing problem. That's it.
Well, we thought we had a solution with lot 16 with that apartment building, but we don't know where that's going now.
I do think one of the issues here, though, is if we keep looking to developers to solve this problem for us, we're going to keep running into the same issues where the developers are like, yeah, we totally want to solve this problem for you. And then once there's not a mint to be made, they're like, oh, that damnedest thing happened. You wouldn't believe it, but interest rates went up, and actually, like, we don't want to do this anymore. And how does that sit with you? And like, it's a community problem. And I think there comes a point. None of this is going against what Councillor Kennington said, which it's like, it's not even like agree or disagree. It seems like facts, which you either believe or you don't, and I believe all of them. But it sort of seems like if this is a problem for our community, then like someone within the community needs to solve it. We can't just sort of be waiting like a cargo cult for somebody to come in and, I don't know, some like benefactor to be like, I'll build this for you. That's never going to happen. So I don't know. Like it's hard. It's hard for me to push back against members of the community that are like, look, we're trying to solve this. But yeah, I agree. Like all of your points are super valid. This is a bit of a conundrum.
It is.
Any other comments? So, Mr. Rotenberg, if we make the recommendation as it's stated, but put as presented at the end of it, would that allow staff the opportunity to continue working with this group?
I have an alternative. Let me present it, and it may satisfy Councillor Maftee's request with regard to metrics. So let me put it up there. We'll see if it completely missed the mark, which happens sometimes, and then we can go try this again.
Okay.
So 1, 2, and 3, the X's there are maybe the metrics that Councillor Maftee was referring to. We would just have to fill those in to figure out what it is.
Yeah, I'm just not the guy to come up with those numbers, but presumably we have enough expertise in our community to come up with them.
If I may, Madam Mayor, maybe a possibility is to utilize this resolution and just specify a higher density housing options. Right, because from what I've been hearing from council is the primary concern with the project is the low density, which results in higher costs, higher maintenance. It's doesn't use land wisely, the limited resources that we have. So the resolution could be that council directs staff to work with the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative to review additional high density employee housing options. And it's, how high? I think that one's kind of a hard one to materialize on the fly. If there's other metrics that are also council would like to consider, we could always throw those in.
I think that was the biggest one, was the density. So Mr. Rouleau is saying it should be called high-density employer housing. It's really for employees, though.
It is for employees. Yeah. We could leave it as just high-density housing.
Okay.
Yeah, when we're talking about what the use is for, and we're talking about, again, a housing crisis, and we're talking about employee housing, which is not going to be full all the time, and that we're building housing and donating land to build housing that is not necessarily going to house Ucluelet people. The whole idea behind this was kind of temporary staff housing, which if you look around, most employers in Tofino have done what they've done, and they're staffing and they're buying houses, they're developing housing for their staff. The BlackRock built staff housing. They want to build more staff housing. It seems to me that if you're a business, it's a line item in your business plan to have staff. And I get that can be hard, but maybe you get together with some of your fellow businesses and you buy a lot and you develop it and you develop housing. that can be used for your staff, or anyone, can be sold, somebody can move into it, somebody can live in it. But if we start compartmentalizing who uses each unit, then we end up with empty units and we're not truly housing people. It's just a revolving door.
This is a very specific project for employers to have housing for their staff.
I get that, and because of that, that should be the employer's responsibility to buy land and build that housing, not the community as a whole.
I think this housing cooperative has worked in other places, from what I understand, so it's not a new idea. I think they just don't have it quite nailed on the head yet.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna jump in. I have no horse in this race. I mean, other than the horse that everyone has in this race. But like, I run a nonprofit. I'm an employer. I employ 5 to 10 people a year. There's no way that I could possibly go in with anybody to purchase a piece of land, and so I think that there is a niche of small businesses that just, they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the power of a BlackRock or of a Long Beach Lodge Resort, or like, we don't have the capital to do that. And it's a niche. It's not solving the big problem, but it's solving a problem. And I understand that a doctor's not going to come and live in a 450 square foot unit, but maybe one of my interns would, or maybe the field school coordinator that I'm desperately trying to hire would, and maybe the manager of a surf shop would. So I don't think that they'd sit empty. Like, I think that there is a need for this type of thing, and even if this isn't a perfect solution, it's a solution. And I think maybe we just need to figure out a workaround here. I don't know. Maybe the crux of it is, it's just not, the district's not the right partner. The district just doesn't have the land. I mean, Lord knows there are large chunks of land in this community that are zoned for affordable housing that aren't being used for it. And maybe it's not the district's responsibility or place to do this if our land is so limited. But I'm just reluctant to, down the idea if it can work. So again, this is just I guess my original point stands as an employer. I know I'm not the only one who could benefit from it, even if I'm not in a position to apply the mechanisms that you suggested.
But you would benefit if we had more housing that wasn't earmarked for specific, like just more housing.
Yeah, but all the housing I see is like completely out of reach for anyone that I would employ. It's out of reach for just about anyone. Like, we see more housing. There's housing being built all around town right now, but it's all housing for people who, it's not for people who live here and work here, because they can't afford it. Like, there's no employer that pays anyone enough to afford the type of housing that's going up right now, and that's the problem that I see.
That is the problem.
Okay, you agreed on something. That's great.
We agree on a lot. Yeah.
It's just how to execute. It's like do we solve this one little thing, or do we solve the greater problem? And because we only have 2 pieces of land, we have a choice. Do we solve the big problem, or do we put a Band-Aid on it? And that's just where I'm coming from.
I think we've nixed the land idea, and we're just on to the motion on the wall here.
Do we even need to make this motion, though? Because anybody has the right to approach staff and present an idea. So, again, to what you're saying, creating false hopes and creating these metrics that if they meet them, but it's still not to our liking, have we just wasted everybody's time? So if you just leave it open, and it's up to you to come to council and to district planners with a plan that maybe we can execute or support. But I really worry about giving specific metrics to a project, because by the time it comes to us, things could change. We could come up with land, we could lose some land, who knows where we're going to be. So I don't think it's fair to set boundaries or parameters to which they should come back to us. They should come back to us with a plan that works and we can support.
Yeah.
And there are no metrics in this motion, so I think it gives this group a little bit of a glimmer of hope. Hope
Except
that
the high density part.
Well, maybe come back with an apartment building.
we don't know what they'll come back with.
I don't
But I
know.
think we should move forward with this motion.
Like I said, if we don't get something to hear from the politicians, it's not going to happen. So if I can't tell them that the Coolidge Council is willing to give up some land in a year, then it's all going to fall apart. So this is a solution we need to get.
Well, come back to us with that specific ask. That's all I can suggest. Do you want to make the motion?
I'm discombobulated here. So I'm making this motion right now. I move that council direct staff to work with the Pacific Rim Housing Development Cooperative to review additional high density housing options.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Okay.
We're halfway.
Okay, item 6.4 is Lot 16 subdivision, frontage.
Pardon me, Madam Mayor, sorry to interrupt. Within the report, there was a recommendation with respect to advising them on the land. It's not necessary to make that motion, but I didn't want it to pass without advising council that it was there within the report. Not making a motion to not allocate land it completes the same process there. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware.
I'm aware, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Item 6.4 is Lot 16 subdivision, frontage of proposed Lot 2. This report will be presented by our municipal planner, Mr. Toogood. Thank you.
Hi, through the mayor. This report is concerning the proposed subdivision of Lot 16 and the minimum frontage distance required by the Local Government Act. Lot 2, the townhouse lot. Joey, do you have a slide for this? Next slide, please, Joey. The townhouse lot is the large lot to the right of the Lot 16 subdivision, quite on the bend. The two red rectangles represent the frontage. One is the frontage on the road, and the other is representing a fire lane access that is currently being proposed as a right-of-way.
Can you speak closer into the mic, please?
Sure. The lower red rectangle is the fire lane access, which is currently reserved as a right-of-way. The Lot 2, the townhouse lot of the Lot 16 development, was designated R3 high-density residential in 2021 and was given a frontage requirement of 18 meters. The proposed Lot 2 will have a frontage of 35.4 meters and would meet this requirement. In addition to the zoning frontage requirement, Section 512 of the Local Government Act requires a frontage of 10% of the lot's perimeter. Lot 2 would only have 7.3%. Even by adding the fire access lane as dedicated land, the frontage would only be 8.3%. Which is closer, but still less than the required 10%. Council may exempt what is, in essence, a technicality of the subdivision process by resolution, and doing so would be consistent with the zoning designation adopted for the proposed Lot 16 development back in 2021. I'll leave it there, and if you have any questions.
Does council have any questions? Councillor Anderson?
Trying to think if that impacts any of the residents there on Victoria there, but I don't think it does it? It's backed up. It's a lane that's in the land there, and this was essentially laid out in the original plan, wasn't it?
Yeah, through the mayor, yeah, that's correct. The lot arrangements don't change at all, except for the fire access lane,
Right.
which we're proposing in this resolution to make that a subject of this resolution, so that when a fire access lane becomes part of somebody's yard, it's like the perfect place to park a boat, right? It's part of their lands, and having them dedicated makes the real clear lines. It's, the lot smaller, it doesn't sell for as much, but it's very clear for the municipality that this is our lands, and it's there for a reason.
No boat parking.
Yeah, no boat parking.
No, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Would council like to make a motion?
I'll do this one. I will move that council, with regard to the proposed subdivision of Lot 16 Marine Drive and subject to the dedication of a 6-meter fire access lane as highway on the west side of proposed Lot 24, exempt the proposed Lot 2 townhouse parcel from the minimum 10% highway frontage under Section 512, subsection 2 of the Local Government Act.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Anderson, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you. The next item is 6.5, winter lights purchasing. This report will be presented by Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is coming to council because of our purchasing policy. Council has approved the purchase of $80,000 worth of decorative lighting, which was part of the resort development strategy adopted in 2022. Our purchasing policy indicates that if you're going to purchase anything above $75,000 or $25,000, you need to do a competitive bidding process. So this is a supplier that we're going to purchase lights. So it's not an install. There's no project associated with it. So it kind of falls outside of the normal realm of a competitive bidding process with respect to a request for proposal. So staff is asking council to authorize the purchase of the commercial lights through Decra Light Canada without undertaking that competitive bidding process. We have done, or I should say, Ms. Fortune has completed the investigation into suppliers for decorative lighting. So she's going with the most robust lights that are well priced and of high quality. In years gone by, we've gone to like Canadian Tire to buy those. They don't last very long. We purchased some in 2022 that were installed around the municipal office, and they are looking really good and high quality. So these new purchases, they're more expensive, but they're a lot more robust as well. So we're just asking for authorization to just go to a sort of a direct award to Decra Light Canada for the purchase of the winter lights, as well as we're looking for confirmation of our Parks and Recreation team's preferred choice of pole lights. There's 3 options within the report. They prefer option number 1, the kind of snowflakes with a little bit of blue in the middle. But there are 3 options that they considered, and these would be going along Matterson and Peninsula, I believe.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lawrence? You have one?
No, I was just going to jump on.
Oh, okay. So go ahead.
I'll just make the motion. If that's okay. I move the council authorize the purchase of commercial winter exterior lights from Decralite Canada without undertaking a full competitive bidding process. I would also move that council approve option 1 as described in report number 23-111 as the preferred decorative pole light.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion?
I'll just say that it's worth it getting commercial lights. As someone who loves lights and has a lot of lights, I go through lights like nobody's business. So
They're so fast.
It's great to spend the extra money to have them last, for sure. Any other discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
Just ripping through here.
Report item 6.6 is Salmon Fest special event. This report will also be presented by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a new event being hosted by the Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce and Redfish Restoration Society. They're looking to hold a gathering and fun run and night market on September 10th from 4 to 8 p.m. The special event permit issued by the municipality has already been submitted and reviewed. They are looking to sell alcohol at the event, and it's a requirement of the province to get a special occasions license and a council resolution stating that it is permissible for them to sell alcohol within a municipal facility. So this gives them that authority to apply for the SOL and host their event for it. So this is just with respect to the sale of alcohol at the event.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lawrence? Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll move that council authorize the use of 160 Seaplane Base Road by the Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce and Redfish Restoration Society to host a beer garden in association with a fun run and night market on Sunday, September 10th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, any further discussion?
I just note that I communicated with Mandela Smulders from Redfish, and I think it's really clear to me that the intent of this event is to be a community event. I know that there's anytime liquor sales come up, there's always a concern, or at least a subset of the population that's concerned that this is going to turn into a booze fest, and that's absolutely not the impression I got. And I'm super happy to support this. I think it's going to be great, and yeah, it's going to be lovely.
Any further discussion?
So you're saying that when it comes to a salmon run, it's good to get things done upstream?
I wouldn't deny you the pleasure of going on the record as having made that statement, but I'll second it.
What have I done?
That's really bad.
Okay, no further discussion. All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
I get once you're a dad, it's your prerogative to make dad jokes.
Full on, he's dad joking.
The last report item is 6.7, the 4th annual Dustin Riley Soapbox Derby. This report will also be presented by Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is for a road closure associated with the Soapbox Derby. It would be the 4th annual event. The closure is between Bay Street, along Bay Street from the intersection of Peninsula Road to the intersection of Cedar Road. They anticipate the closure to be from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, September 9th.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lawrence?
Yep.
We've been down this road before.
Oh no!
Wow, really? In a soapbox? The dad jokes all come out after
When you're
7
standing
o'clock.
on a soapbox, you've got the crowd's
know,
ear.
right?
So
They started this.
Yes, you did. Okay, no questions. Somebody would like to make the motion?
I'll do it. I love that Miss Fortune goes on vacation and leaves you with all her reports, by the way, Mr. Lawrence. I will move that council authorize the closure of Bay Street from the intersection of Peninsula Road to the intersection of Cedar Road and Cedar Road from the intersection of Bay Street to the intersection of Park Lane from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, September 9th, 2023 for the annual Soapbox Derby. Should that read the annual Dustin Riley Soapbox Derby?
Sure, you can add that in. And do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Awesome. You waited all this time for that? Are there any notices of motion? We have one correspondence item. Would council like to bring it forward for discussion? It's from Black Press Media. No? Okay. We have 10 information items.
Mayor, there's also the late item, which is the UBCM.
Oh.
BC assessments.
This is the one that's been completely redacted.
Yeah, that's
It was CCs.
that is many CCs.
We need the BCs.
Look at this.
We're going to be voting on an increased toner budget soon, I think.
That's right. All right, this is an invitation for us to meet with BC Assessment. I thought, I had a discussion with Mr. Lawrence this morning. I thought it might be valuable, especially for the new councillors, because they always do provide some interesting points of view. They never offer to change anything that we ask them to, but it's still really an interesting conversation. Councillor Hoare has been at a few with me, I think.
One or two, yes. And they still compare my place to the Ridge.
Oh, lovely. The meetings are 25 minutes in length and will be held on Tuesday, September 19th and Wednesday, September 20th at the Coast Cole Harbor Hotel. So what do you need from us, Mr. Lawrence?
I believe we just need an indication from council if you would like me to set up a meeting with BC Assessment, and if there's any topics that council would are of interest to council, then I can relay that to BC Assessment in the meeting request to bring forward or at least have notes on to have discussion items with.
Councillor Anderson?
Through the mayor, I would ask if we have this meeting, I'd like to inquire about the algorithm that they use for the 3-year rolling averages. I've never been able to figure that out. My wife does this for a living, and she also
can't figure it
know
out
how that works. So.
Any other topics anyone would like to discuss? I think we already mentioned the split. Residential versus commercial, like Black Rock and Terrace Beach Resort used to be like that as well. Pluvio. Yeah. No other topics spring to mind?
I remember talking to them at the conference, and they're like, well, we can't really tell you anything because we don't know what's going on. And I was like, okay. So.
They're usually a little more informative than that.
Well, they were very genial, but I certainly didn't walk away feeling like I had gained any insight into the process.
Okay.
I think it's different when we actually sit down with them, because
that's
then
when they give you like the straight dope.
It's like when you're meeting with them at the trade show. It's you know, you're one of a million faces. So
Take your socks and get
when you
out.
actually have a meeting with them, yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, it is a little different.
At the AVICC, they gave me a little roadside emergency kit. It says BC assessment on it. I don't know if you guys got that. I asked the fella, is there there anything inside that'll help me pay for my taxes because my assessment is too high? He said no.
He said no.
He said
Okay.
no.
Useless, like I said.
You'll-
I jest.
You'll get more out of
Those
a
kits
sit-down
are
meeting,
very
for sure. Okay, so that's all you require from us then?
Sure.
Is a-
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. We have 10 information items. The first one is 9.1, District Water Levels, Conservation and Staged Restrictions. This report will be presented by the Director of Engineering Services, Mr. McIntosh. Welcome back.
Thank you again. So this is a quick report for you, Mayor and Council. This is report provides information concerning the current and historic water levels in the aquifer, as well as water conservation and restrictions, and the development of a policy for water usage in the district. I have 4 slides here for you. Each are from your report, appendicizing report. This first one, I don't believe council has seen before, but it just illustrates the aquifer. So it's a 3.5 by 3.5 kilometer body of water. There's about 12 different user groups that draw water from the aquifer. Most important to the district for today's conversation are the 2 that we receive data to better understand our aquifer and our well levels. That's, of course, the district's 4 wells that pull water out of the aquifer, and we monitor those with a system called SCADA. It stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System, and it takes daily data and it stores that for 3 years. The second important monitoring station is the provincially owned observation well. That's called observation well number 329, and as well, that takes data daily and stores it for up to 30 years. So combining these 2 data sets speaks to data confidence here in our ability to really fully understand where our water levels are in the district today and on a longitudinal level. I will mention that those the 2 wells, the district well and the observation well, they move together, they rise and fall together. So it's a representation that this whole body of water moves in tandem and is the same. In front of you is a representation of the wells that the district owns, the Lost Shoe Creek aquifer wells, the four district wells. Along the bottom, the x-axis is time. There's 2 years represented here, and the y-axis there's meters. Important to point out, the blue in the background, that large volume of water, is levels in the aquifer, rising and falling, and the green in the foreground is rainfall falling at the Tofino Airport across the 2 years. I'd like to point out, importantly, that the low in this 2 years is about 7 meters, and the average here is about 8.5 meters. Currently, the district on the far right-hand side, July 2023, is at about 7.79 meters. So we're just slightly below our average and trending towards what looks like it could be a regular low that we see here twice. As well, just general observations about the 2 years in front of us. The period in between 2021 and 2022 had quite a lot of rainfall comparatively to the period of 2022 and 2023 that we're in now. There's one spike in November of 2023, and that's when the district experienced a 1 in 1 century year rainfall event. Very significant rain fell in the district. The blue section, the aquifer levels, just right of that, we see a little bit of a divot in that top volume of water, and that's the district flushing water pipes in the winter of 2022. So we did quite a aggressive flush at that point, and it made a fairly small impact. We don't see that in 2022 and 2023, a nominal effect from flushing, and because we did a longer flushing period. So I guess takeaways from this report is our current position, what a low looks like in this 2-year time frame, what a high looks like, and what the impact of extreme rainfall is against what we're hearing now is unusually dry and hot summers. So we're seeing two extremes here. Perhaps climate change, I'm not sure, but there's extreme rain and extreme dryness happening here in front of us, just in this 2-year period.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You're going to hate me. If the population of Ucluelet doubled, what would we expect to see the replenishment time for the aquifer? And I know this is a tough question, but I guess essentially at the end of the day, my question is, at what point would we ever be in a situation where we think that maybe the rainfall that we get wouldn't replenish the aquifers we're using at this time?
Yeah,
Or
through
at
the
that
mayor.
time, sorry.
Yeah, through the mayor, absolutely. Thank you. It's a good question, an important one, and I have sort of a general answer, a technical answer, and then a promise to return with a more fulsome answer. So generally, the district uses about 2,500 cubic meters of potable water a day, and comparatively, we can take a look at that blue decline that's happening in January, February of 2022. And this is when the district is opening up for a 3-week period the hydrants to do very aggressive flushing. So our water usage at that point goes from what we currently see on a daily average of about 2,000 square meters or so to more than 10,000 square meters. So what we're doing during that period is flushing as much water as we possibly can to clean the pipes. So that just sort of gives a general indication of the daily average of usage doubling, tripling, actually quadrupling. More technically, part of our water program that we're doing, our large capital improvement project, will be the very front end task is going to be hiring a hydrological engineer as part of this tender to come in and take a look at the robustness and the real data that's behind just this cursory high level information I'm showing you to sort of verify and quantify what the strength of the aquifer is. We have lots of useful reports at hand. There's a water master plan. There's a water conservation study that's been completed. There's water studies on the well that have happened, but none to my knowledge have really quantified what the replenished rate of the aquifer is compared to the OCP as it grows in 30 years. So we need to answer that before we go ahead with our large capital plan. So if you like, Councillor Anderson, I can also re-engage and provide more information if you like.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a brief 2-year period. Let's zoom out. So this is now looking at 10-year period, and this is from the observation well that's provincially owned. So a different set of data here. Again, speaking to data confidence and data quality. What we see here is the blue band is the 10-year min and max from that observation well over a season. The green band is the historical median, and the red band is the current data levels in that aquifer. So general observation for the current year is that we're running below average. And then at some point in May, the aquifer levels replenished and we're strong. And as we're into August, and it looks like trending into September and October, we're going to be below that median and perhaps approaching a bit of a low there. Yet to be determined. But right now we're near average, we're strong, the aquifer is in a good position, and nothing unusual from what we've seen before. So this table in front of you, Council, is defining water use restrictions that's been prepared and is currently in draft form. The table defines 4 different stages of water use restrictions which are linked to the aquifer levels. The stages and restrictions rise and fall proportionally with the aquifer levels as they rise and fall as well. Currently, the district is just in a general state of water conservation, and there are no formal restrictions in place. Staff will continue to monitor this aquifer levels very, very closely as we go through August and into the fall, and certainly into the winter. If a need for added caution develops, a community update calling for appropriate stage restrictions will be issued. That level right now at 7.79, it looks like we could be trending towards a point of 7 meters, and at that point we'd be calling for that first level of restriction. Part of this graph, part of this information is the beginning step of a water conservation and usage policy for the district. So district staff will be working through that in the coming months into the winter in preparation for implementation in the summer of 2024. Important to that policy will be it needs to be Skookum, and so it will be fulsome engagement with the water users, specifically the commercial users that have the biggest impact on the water use, and opportunity to make the gains with conservation. So that's it for where we are with water. Council, do you have any questions at this time?
Any questions from council? Councillor Hoare?
I like the look of the stages, just so you know. I'm pretty sure it's not Skookum. Skookum means fast in Chinook, just for the record.
Thank you very much.
No other questions? Thank you for that report. That was really, really useful information.
Thank you.
We'll just need a motion to go past 3.5 hours. It's 7:24.
Could I have a motion to go past 3.5 hours?
So moved.
Councillor Mafty?
Seconded.
Councillor Anderson? All in favor? And carried. Are there any other information items council would like to bring forward for discussion?
Is that small talk forum? There's the.
Yeah, I was going to flag that one too. Councillor Kennington and Mr. Lawrence have put together a topic for it, and I assume submitted it by last Friday.
That is correct.
Great. So we'll find out if they really want to discuss that. Council committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
All right. What? I'm trying to think. I don't have anything ready to go here, but I was just thinking one of the emails that I think we all got was from Jennifer Stigter from Island Health. And she's mentioning that there's going to be the medical health officer for Central Island is visiting, Dr. Sandra Allison. And that's in September 25th to 29th. So she was asking if anyone wants to do a one-on-one meeting with her. So I responded, and we're just setting up a date now. So I'm not sure if you're meeting as well, but I figure one of us does, so it's fine.
I had a meeting set up with her in June, and then the road collapsed.
Oh.
But I will reach back out to her because I'd like to meet her when she comes out in September.
And I'm just wondering also, this is maybe for after, but I was going to ask if, find out who runs the medical clinic in Ucluelet here, and maybe Dr. Marshall, and get in touch with them so I can speak with them before the UBCM when I meet with the health minister.
That would be Dr. Marshall,
Right.
Carrie Marshall. Yeah, reach out to her for sure.
Okay. Is there a way I can? I don't have her number or anything. I can give you that. Oh, you do? Okay, yes.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's it for me.
Because you're going to take our lead on that that ministerial meeting at UBCM.
Right.
On that topic. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Great. Councillor Hoare.
I knew there was something I was going to do. That was prepping. Since our last meeting, the only meeting I've attended was the Wild Pacific Trail Society. They spent quite a bit of time talking about the temporary use permit for Blackrock. But just so you guys all know, lots of education walks and things happening just about every day. In fact, I think it is every day in August. And Josh, their education guy, was like trying to encourage more locals to come out, because the walks are fun and informative. And, you know, there's people from away, but there's also, you know, it's nice when it's locals too. Oyster Jim was there. That's always fun. Yeah, and they had some questions for Abby, but Abby wasn't there. So beyond that, I attended Yuki Days, which was great fun. I won the old ladies gumboot toss. You know, so practice your arms next year, boys. But the barbecue was really well attended on Friday night. There was super good crowds, and I have never seen that many people on the grounds. And I spoke to some of my friends who grew up here, and they were like, they hadn't seen it like that since the logging and fishing industries were booming here. So it was pretty crazy. And as someone who was on the front gate right at the beginning, I've never seen the line that long. And it was a fabulous event, and I want to send some kudos out to Parks and Rec, even though I know Parks and Rec is on the other side of the country right now, at least the manager. But the whole team really, really did well. And I'll just let everybody know that it doesn't happen without volunteers. So get yourself a green shirt. Sean got all excited. First year he's officially been a volunteer, and his favorite color is green. And so I picked up the shirts and I sent him a picture, and I said, look, obviously they knew you were volunteering this year. So you always get a shirt. So
I think I have one in every color.
There are a few colors that I am not a big fan of, so they have, you know, disappeared over the years, but I do still have quite a number of them too.
That's it for you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kennington.
July 25th, I attended the Accessibility Committee second meeting where we started hammering out the framework, and we were informed that we are one of the first districts, municipalities to start this process. So maybe we'll be the first to finish. Who knows? But it's going really well.
That's great.
That's all I have.
Awesome.
Did you get on the walking tour, Ian?
I signed up for it, but it was already sold out, so it's standing room only. That was not meant.
Dad joke number.
Oh my God, that was not supposed to be a joke. But
okay,
matter.
That's great. Councillor Mafty.
Nothing to report at this time.
We have to get you on some committees.
Yep. I'll be honest, I got my hands full these days, so
you just need to get on one that meets like every 2 weeks, like I am. Jeez, I always have something to say.
You got something.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot to mention that I had a meeting with Marcy DeWitt with the ACHN, and that was part of the strategic meeting and interview for their coming year, and it's all the table of partners do an interview and a survey, and then yeah, she's handing me some documents to take to UBCM because she's not going to be able to make it there. So I think I'm representing ACHN there. I have to talk to her. She's sending me some information about that.
Great, good for you. Myself, my meetings were actually down since our last council meeting. For a change, July 27th, ACRD hosted a Zoom meeting for the West Coast, providing information about supports available for businesses due to the highway foreclosure. And it was mainly Community Futures. There were 3 speakers, but they were all kind of related to Community Futures, and so it was interesting to see what supports are available for businesses. For Community Futures out of Port Alberni, you have to actually just apply, but then there is another program through them called the Rural Advisory Program, Regional Business Advisory Services through Community Futures. And they have money for businesses that have been suffering because of the road closure. The only prerequisite is you can't be a startup. You have to have been in business prior, like for some time. And they will provide a business advisor. They have 2 coaches on staff that are specifically there to coach businesses through financial hardships. So that was interesting. Yuki Days, July 29th and 30th, I was able to help judge the parade. That was a fun job to be tasked with. And again, yeah, I was in that big long lineup that went all the way to the stop sign the first day. It was crazy. But good to see the attendance was way, way up. And tons of things for kids. I've never seen so many bouncy castles and slides and buckets of soap that they jump into, and it was pretty fun. August 1st, Mr. Lawrence and I met with Max Yajok, I think it's how it's pronounced, from Island Health. And they still can't give us an announcement as to who won the bid for the medical clinic and where it's going to be. October, I think, is when they figure they'll be able to release that information. So that was kind of the gist of that meeting. Okay, question period.
I just forgot something in my report, and that is that one of the things I was doing when I volunteered was giving out the ride tickets. You commented on all the things for the kids, and I got a lot of thank yous from parents and the kids for those tickets. So kudos to the district.
And I think if the first few were given free, is that right? And then they had to pay for them.
Yeah, it was 2 free. But I made a point of looking at the list of what was required for each. But I mean, you could do the giant slide for 1 ticket. So that was like 2 rides down the slide. And when you're looking at the little girls about this big, that's all they want to do is go on that giant slide. Yeah. So, yeah.
Awesome. Question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. Are there any questions from the audience?
I'm good, thank you.
None from our one audience member.
I had all sorts of questions.
Okay. Mr. Rotenberg, any questions by Zoom or telephone?
We do not have anyone attending via Zoom or telephone at this point in time.
And have we received any questions via email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
No, not at this time.
All right, that's the end of our agenda. We will adjourn this meeting at 7:36.
I like the fewer meetings in the summer, but I hate that they're always really long. I almost want them more often.
I don't know about that. You kind of tripped me up on the